I want to thank everybody for being here today. This is something different than what we've done in the past. And again, most of you who know have come to TechNet over the last, how many years? We started 40 years ago. Normally we end midday on Thursday with our keynote, which Admiral Paparo just did. But in the last few years, there's been a lot of discussion about why aren't we having any deeper dives on what requirements are, what the challenges are, and then how can industry help. So what most of you from industry would know as an industry day if you participated in those. So we did one yesterday with chemical biodefense from the JPO Seaburn Day, and that was great, and now we're doing the one with Marines. And so I appreciate everybody being here today. You'll see more of these, and you will see them more than just in a once-a-year TechNet time frame, October, November. We already have some things planned, and we will address that. So again, I wanted to thank, first of all, Armatus and PICHTR, who are our sponsors for this today. Obviously, Colonel Hussey, Bob Schultes, Colonel Q, and TJ, and then Brandon Newell will introduce himself as well in a minute, for being here, making the time, and then thank all of you, obviously, for making the time this afternoon. I think this will be well worth your time, and we've put a lot together, but I think it's a deeper dive than, as I was saying to Colonel a few minutes ago, we had all the sixes, 9 sixes with General Smith on a panel earlier this morning, and General Smith said, this is great because now you can understand our requirements. Well, we can't understand 9 different sixes requirements across the entire Indo-PACOM AOR in 1 hour. Unfortunately, I've been doing this a long time, and I understand that. So I think these are the types of things that we need. You're going to understand requirements, there's going to be opportunities, and there will be follow-ons. We have some things planned. Ian Kitajima from PICHTR will talk about those that are coming up. Our next one is in February, so you'll see these things quarterly and not just wait a year to come back together or go to different conferences on the mainland. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank Clark from Armatus to do a couple welcome comments, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon. My name is Frank Clark. I'm the COO of Armatus, former Army officer, 26 and a half years, including my 14 years in Japan, where I was a foreign area officer, served 2 tours as an attaché, and I've lived and worked in Japan for 20 years now. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Work with the Marines workshop. This is an Industry Day strategy event organized by our partner, the Pacific International Center for High Technology, or PICHTR, as well as Armatus. And before we get started, I'd also like to thank a few folks. First of all, Ian Kitajima, the president of PICHTR, Lieutenant Colonel retired Brandon Newell, founder of DCI Next, and your MC for today's event. Jeff Bloom, of course, AFCEA, and then all of our distinguished speakers. Really appreciate you taking the time. This is important to reach out to industry and make sure we understand those needs. The new pipeline and the February acquisition design sprint are linked to future RFIs. So please make sure that your badge was scanned before you leave if it wasn't, so that we can keep you posted. And the acquisition design sprint will also be hosted in Honolulu by PICHTR in February. And there's a card in the back. If you didn't get it, please take one of those. As mentioned, PICHTR is led by Ian Kitajima, who will speak about that pipeline. Facing U.S. contracts, Armatus is a U.S. veteran-owned and operated non-traditional company, registered to do business in Japan and Australia with vetted teams of allied nation companies. We are developing a mirror procurement program with allied nations to use this new U.S. pipeline and its competed selections to speed up their complementary acquisitions. Facing allied governments, Armatus acts as a defense tech integrator of primes and non-traditionals. And with that, I will pass it over to Ian and PICHTR, and again, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Frank. Good afternoon. Wow, it's really great to see such a big crowd at the end of FCEA. We're expecting about 5 people maybe to show up, so this is fantastic. So thank you. My name is Ian Kitajima. I'm with the Pacific International Center for High Technology Research. You've probably never heard of us, but we've been here in Hawaii for almost 40 years, and it was started actually with a handshake between President Reagan and Prime Minister Nakasone at the time to create closer relationships between the United States and Japan through technology collaborations, which we've continued to do over the years. And as part of that, we are hosting, there's two things I'm going to talk about. One is we're hosting a very small, intimate conference. Nothing like TechNet where you have probably, what, Jeff, 1,500 people, 2,000, 5,000? Okay. So our session is going to be limited to 200 people. So if you're a small business, you're an operator, you have gaps, you have requirements, RFIs, we would love to work with you to design that very intimate event. It's going to be our second one. It's going to be the February of next year. And like Frank said, there's a small card back there. And what we learned from the first conference was everybody liked the fact that you have only 200 people there. So you really got to spend time taking a deeper dive and meeting people and trying to create those opportunities to work together. So we'd love to work with the Marines to kind of showcase your RFIs as part of it, as well as some other services. So, and as small businesses as well. The other part too is it's an international gathering. So there's going to be a lot of international folks there as well. The second thing I wanted to tell you about is there's a flyer back there for this thing called the Apex OTA. So it's an advanced prototyping and experimentation OTA. So it's actually a brand new OTA that just started in July. But what's unique about it is it goes from everything from R&D to prototyping to actually production as well. But we also can support experimentations and such. And it cuts across many different areas. And so please come and talk to us about that as well. I would love to work with all of you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. I'm excited to be here with you. Like so many in the crowd, I used to look like a Marine. We don't say fellow Marine, right? I mean, a former Marine. We just say Marine. Because in our core, we continue the fight, right? The mission continues for us. Many of you here now, whether you served or whether you've been a government civilian or you've been a defense tech professional, you do it because it's a passion for the mission, for the warfighter that is there facing, the challenges that we have today. And what it is a coalition of the willing, right? We have Marines that stand here in the gap that say, we have a problem that we need to solve. We aren't equipped or manned to solve it, but we're not dismayed, right? We'll step out in the void and we ask, who is willing to join us? And that is what we've set up here, is to say, who is willing to join us? You're going to hear from the panelists and from the speakers what our mission is out here in MARFORPAC. You're going to hear how we're attacking the enemy, how we're attacking the challenge. You're going to hear how we've been setting up R&D to establish the stepping stones to that. And then you're going to hear where the gaps are, because we need you. The Marines need you. Those of us, the gray beards, right, look like hippies now. It's a coalition of the willing, right, to stand in the gap, to understand the technology that you provide, and understand that it is a collaborative team between industry and government that's going to solve these problems. The Marine can't solve it alone. And it really needs a whole of government. So you'll even hear some collaborations across joint services, talking to NGA earlier, maritime domain awareness and things that they're doing, right? And how that ingestion. And so with that in mind, we're talking about data sharing. You see the agenda here for today. So we're getting started a little late, but don't worry, we'll move quickly. You're going to hear about MARFORPAC operating concepts first from the Colonel, 2 MEFs abreast. You're going to hear about CJ2 and PROJECT Dynamis, right, from both Bob and from TJ. You're going to hear about our data sharing and our joint networks, right? And then we're going to take a break, 1500, 1515. You're going to come back and hear about MARFORPAC mission threads, right? Make it more tangible. Colonel Quinter is going to talk about from the MAWS perspective. You're going to hear from a warfighter roundtable at 1600, 1700, and then industry next steps at 1700, 1730. So we've set it up in that format, right, so that you can understand how we're attacking the problem, where our gaps are, how you can help, and how this unlocks an 18-month process of crawl, walk, run, and sprint that's coming alongside Project Dynamis efforts that are in experimentation. And so we're very excited about you joining us today. To make it a little bit more tangible, I'm going to highlight this was from an event in May at Marine Corps Base Hawaii, where Marine Corps Systems Command, PMGBAD, Ground-Based Air Defense, is bringing their mid-tier acquisition capabilities of ISR that are meant for both the installation and to move forward into the Philippines and the first island chain, there with the warfighters. Those same systems are flowing in and out from Marine Corps Base Hawaii to the exercises. Indo-PACOM J8 comes over and says, why are we not data sharing to our Filipino counterparts? Why can we not share tipping and queuing as an unclassed data share? And then as we move that echelon up, right, into classifications and all the way into targeting and to joint fires, how are we sharing across the joint fires network, across the naval fires? These are the types of complex challenges that our Marines can't solve on their own. What you're going to hear from us is what we've established, what the Marine Corps has established to solve this, and then where those gaps are that you can feel and start to fill with us in a crawl, walk, run approach. And so to make it a little more tangible before I hand it over to the Colonel, at DCI Next, our mission is to strengthen national security by empowering the warfighter. The way we do that is by bridging the divide between the warfighter and the program offices, the defense acquisition offices, and industry leaders.
When we can bring the industry partners who are performing on government R&D projects, the program offices that are interested in learning about how those industry performers are developing the systems, and into our requirements, that's already good, right? But then you inject the warfighter, the end user, into this event where all three elements now get to communicate with one another. You tighten the acquisition cycle.
What I hope is that events like this encourage people like me in uniform to find new ways to get capabilities into the Marines' hands. The NIWC Pacifics and the DIUs, those were names that were not familiar to me even 3 years ago. So I was given free rein in so many ways to go out and explore the space, work with people like Digital Force Technologies to get new and innovative capabilities in the hands of my Marines more quickly. Again, truly blessed to be a part of this event and part of the collision events that we've hosted here in our building, and to have an opportunity to show people that there's just not one way of doing things, to just be agile, to just be flexible, and to go out and really push the envelope. I don't think I could have done that anywhere else but here.
So 3 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Logan and Major David Noble now showed up at 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment, and newly redesignated, no longer an infantry regiment, right, but a littoral regiment, not manned or equipped for the mission. But the Marines are not dismayed. How do we man? How do we equip ourselves, right? They raised their hand and said, we'll figure it out, right? They could not figure it out themselves. They had to have a coalition of the willing across industry and government to start to fill those gaps, right? This is the spirit of the Marine Corps. This is the spirit of the mission out here, to step into the void and invite you to come with us into the challenge. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Colonel Hussey.
All right, I'm not going to stand at the podium, nor am I going to sit down and decide. I'm assuming that you all can hear me in the back. Most people say they can hear me before they can see me, so I know that I don't have any issues with projecting. But to understand the framework of where MARFORPAC is currently, where the Marine Corps here is in the Pacific, there have been a number of changes. So force design, 5 years going, started in 2019. If you can go to the next slide, actually we have some. Or I can do the button pusher
for you if you want.
Strong. Awesome. I'll start with something else. How many active duty, retired, or veteran Marines do we have in the audience today? Okay, so most of you are going to be familiar with at least the first laydown of this piece, and then I'll get into where are we now, really over the last couple of years. So if you look at here, from right to left and from top to bottom, how we array Marine Forces Pacific. One map in Southern California. 1st Marine Division, 3rd Marine Air Wing, 1st Marine Logistics Group, under a 3-star command in Southern California, stationed out there. Moving across, we've got MARFORPAC and Fleet Marine Forces Pacific here on Hawaii. Really, today, has operational control over both the mechs that are in this theater. 4 years ago, that wasn't exactly the case. And then off on the upper left, on the peninsula and in Japan, USFJ rolling through, and then we drop down into Okinawa. And you've got 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. So you've got 3rd Marine Division, 1st Marine Aircraft Wing, and 3rd Marine Logistics Group that are sitting out there. Then you've got, just came online and designated over the last couple of years, Camp Laos in Guam. So you think about, okay, where are we now? Did it exist in the way that it does now 4 and 5 years ago? We want to raid that way. And then, of course, Marine Rotational Force in Darwin, half the months out of the year, for 6 months out of the year, not a fully persisting force down there, but there's a persistent presence in Australia. But you see, okay, here's where the Marine Corps is in the Pacific. And as you can see on some of the numbers, about 76,000 Marines here assigned under the Marine Corps Pacific. It is 2/3 of the Marine Corps' combat power. Not 2/3 of the Marine Corps total force, but 2/3 of the Marine Corps combat power in both 1MEF and 3MEF, arrayed all the way across the Pacific going through. And so you can see, one of the keys on the bottom here over the last 3 to 4 years is our naval integration. Anything about joint force enabling. Commandant releases planning guidance in August. One of the taglines inside of that is the JTAC for the Joint Force, the Joint Terminal Attack Control. What does that mean? Right, we have sensing capability out there. There is precision strike capability that's out there. Who's controlling that? Well, the way that we're going to posture ourselves as the Marine Corps is, the Marine Corps is one of those entities that's going to do that on behalf of the Joint Force. On the upper left, you can see like a number of different bullets on here. Key on here is like number 2, forward position capabilities, supplies, and equipment. Tough to do because 2 things that the previous commander, General Journey, used to say is war winning, combined, joint, all-domain, integrated fires and effects. A lot of words strung together. As we go through all that, but like I said this morning, it was listening to the panel. It's about how are we going to deliver effects as part of the Joint Force and with our partners. That is key. But war losing is, how do you sustain that going through? Well, what does that apply to like C4, C5 ISR, C5 ISRT? Well, that is everything. Everybody's got to move data. Everybody's got to move information. Everybody's got to coordinate, communicate, talk to each other, and control forces and materiel. And so that was one of the key ones. Another piece on this, strengthening relationships with allies and partners going through. You can't persist, you can't be a stand-in force unless you're standing in. And of course, I'll get to that in just a second going through. And probably the biggest one right here is the ability to employ 2 Marine Expeditionary Forces forward. So we don't have a permanent presence forward. Some places it can be considered permanent, but we have a persistent presence in a number of places as we go through. All right. Admiral Converse talked about this on Tuesday. P4 talks about this all the time. All the general and flag officers talk about the tyranny of distance. When you put that into numbers, it's not insignificant when you roll through all this. So you think about what it takes to get from Southern California over to Japan, or from Japan all the way down to Australia. We didn't have how do you get from Southern California to Australia, because that's a long ass way too, to go through all that. But the key about this is this part. And I don't have the words on this slide, but the way that General Journey earlier this year kind of used the term 2 vessels abreast. And the key is to have these 2 Marine Expeditionary Forces, and actually it stretches all the way down. We have a later slide that kind of has a different depiction of that, is that 3MEF, permanently stationed and forward inside of Japan. It stretches all the way down the Ryukyu to the Southwest Islands, which at its closest point are about 60-ish nautical miles from the northern tip of Taiwan. Forces that are interacting and coordinating with forces on Taiwan itself. And then you have one MEF forces, and now some of their assigned battle space is in the Philippines, in the Philippine archipelago, and persisting forward on a rotational basis. So we've got units that are out there. They think all the way stretching down Palau, Oceania, all the way into Australia with MARFORPAC. We also have a rotational force that's out there. If anybody's heard of MCTSSA, Southeast Asia, that's another one MEF element. This is a command element with some capability offset from what MARFORPAC does, and it's forward deployed in the Philippines as another persistent presence that's forward. That's a lot of arrows and lines on the slide. So what? These are the exercises, or at least some of the exercises, and some of the partners that just the Marine Corps has ties with and associations with throughout any given calendar or fiscal year. And there are a lot of them. If we were to put everything that the Joint Force does under the Indo-PACOM umbrella, there'd be too much to put on any one given slide. But the key is exercises to achieve persistent presence forward. And one of the terms that each of the commanders in MARFORPAC has talked about is every exercise that we do is in OAI, Operation, Activity, or Investment, and every OAI is actually a rehearsal. So when you talk about how are we rehearsing our combat capabilities, like, sure, you're training, you're exercising. A lot of times we use the term or just a generic term of OAI for the things that we're doing, or OAIs, the groups of things that we're doing in any given place and time with any given amount of forces. But really, these are all rehearsals. And not to dive into anything, what the adversary is doing and what the other folks are doing, but the key is, if you think about the competition continuum and escalation, and when that occurs, if something were to occur in the Western Pacific, anywhere around here, and you were not in position already, you will probably not get in position. And so the key operational approach for MARFORPAC is to be able to make sure that we have those two MEFs abreast and operating in the forward locations that matter, and like I said, with combat credible capability to be able to do that. And part of that is what is the architecture? Not an architecture. What is the architecture that we need to execute this? What are the networks that's going to arrive on? What are the systems, the applications? Everybody gets enamored with tools and applications. Oh, this thing that does this kind of stuff. Very discrete and specific to go after one certain thing. That's all well and good, but that isn't interoperable and integrate with everything we're doing, then it doesn't help me that much going through. So when you think about what are the requirements, and I know we'll get into this a little bit later, and there are some specifics too, as we look at what Q and TJ have been doing in SoCal and in a bunch of other places on how are we getting to that point. Really does get to that. But as we look at, we talk about integrated operational planning and execution. Nobody does this alone. We've known that we don't fight alone, we don't train alone. We can't operate all by ourselves as a service unto ourselves, or now even as a joint force. And so if it isn't immediately joint, and if it's not driving towards something that looks like shareable with a partner at some level, when we were just talking about with some of the folks, SVU, since it's been unclassified, I need to be able to get information wherever that data comes from. I need to be able to have the capability that cross-levels that machine to machine data transfer directly to a partner force to be able to execute that. And so, the construct that we've been operating under for the last 4 years, really is kind of coming to its own over the last 2 years, is MARFORPAC and really FMFPAC. We don't fight as a Marine component. We integrate with U.S. PAC Fleet, and we become the interdictor. Joint Force Maritime Component Command, going through all that. And then really, as you look at things, is the way that Indo-PACOM has things constructed is we fight as a joint task force. So when you think about what is out here, somewhere kind of in this arc, there's going to be a joint task force that is controlling that. We as the Marine Corps become part of that, and both of these MEFs are assigned essentially battle space and missions and tasks within that to operate as subordinate task forces under that joint task force. So all that to run through that, in order to understand like why are we going to do this, or how do I need to support what the Marine Corps is doing out in the Pacific, you have to understand kind of where we are in time and space. And you know, one of the things I'll leave you with before I turn it over to Bob and we move on with the rest of this is that 4 or 5 years ago, you know, we talked about who has operational control of what entities. That has evolved. And so, you know, as we look at things like operational plans, contingency plans, campaign plans, and campaign orders, you know, Indo-PACOM has been evolving their campaign plan and campaign orders that gets after this. MARFORPAC has a campaign order that we're operating off of that nets and aligns with what Indo-PACOM has laid out. Inside the 39-6, just like I did like when I was inside the 2, there is an Annex Bravo for all intelligence activities that lay out objectives, tasks, and requirements. And I just signed our Annex I, which is the information annex, that talks about how we're going to get after things, space, cyber, C4, MISO, deception, you name it. And so when you think about how do we execute campaign, it's that. It's through those means and mechanisms. So some of those documents are at the classified level, but the things that are shareable, it actually drives, like, no kidding, here's what our objectives and tasks are. And so how do I get the requirements written in the right way that gets me the capabilities that actually gets after those tasks and objectives? All right, I'm going to pause there. I'm assuming, yep, that was the last one for me. I'll pause there, and I know I'm on a short timeline because, you know, some genius of Indo-PACOM decided it was a good week to have both TechNet and InfoPac, which used to be the IO and EW symposium in the same damn week. And so, because I am the 39 and the 6, 39 side, IO and EW, the 6 side, C4 stuff, it pulled in both directions. So, I'll hold there for a second if there are any questions right now. But,
Can you explain the relationship between pushing two maps forward rest and how you guys are going to do the APO concepts? Like how it
hub spoken, think about it, hubs, spokes, and nodes. You know, you've got a MEF headquarters or some level or size of a headquarters, somewhere in Japan and somewhere in the Philippines. But you think about lower echelon forces. So as I talked about, each of those MEFs has a division, a wing, and a logistics group inside of there. And those are echelon 4 units. So if you think echelon 2 is the components, us, pack lead, pack out, those types of things. Each of our MEFs, echelon 3, those headquarters. Echelon 4, divisions, wings, and MLGs. Echelon 5, those 06 command element units. The air groups, the control groups, the regiments, the LLRs. Those are the folks, when you start thinking about, those are going to be the ones even down below the echelon 605 command level, where you start talking like the tactical level EAD and how they disperse their forces to be able to do that. And that's all, it's all mission dependent and all situation dependent on that one. But that's the whole idea. But you think about it, okay, if I've got all those hubs, spokes, and nodes at echelon, how do I network those packs together? How do those folks get tied together? And so that gets right to the point of, okay, well, who has what here? I'm like, I get this piece of hardware, it can talk to this thing, at this echelon, but it can't talk, you know, to this other one, in this other service, or this partner force. That's what we've got to get past. Anybody else?
Mr. Robbie Anderson, previous MARFORPAC White House.
Nice.
So, in this scenario where we're running the two maps in parallel, I'm assuming 7th Fleet command and that command element or the Blue Ridge is going to be behind that with some type of force that's actually integrated and sharing all the ISR information and data.
They're going to be, I wouldn't say behind it. There's not like a physical front and rear going forward. But yes, so there are a number of elements that make up the JTF. Underneath that, 7th Fleet is going to be one of those and directly tied into. All those subordinate task forces are all lateral 3-star commands. And they all got to be tied together in network. It's just kind of like what Eric was talking about this morning, Pittman, in the N6 attack fleet. Okay, what do we have for shipboard come? Again, it gets back to, I got cats on the ground, and some of those may be Marines, some of those may be soldiers inside the MDTF formations or other Army formations. And then I got ships and other, things driving around on the sea. And then I got airplanes in the sky. And everybody's got to be able to talk to each other. Again, and I mentioned it this morning, it's all about closing kill chains. Like, how do I get from sense to strike in a forward location with a partner? Like, at the end of the day, that's what I'm really asking for, is to get forward. Sure.
Fantastic. This is great. I'm curious how you're integrating partners.
Much more robust with the Japanese. We have things called triple Cs that are stood up already. They're combined coordination centers at echelon. So you can make 3MF partners with Western Army. They're already there. They're in the number of spots, and we have folks that are embedded with those headquarters. And then at the highest echelon, Japanese Joint Staff stood up in the open press, their version of a joint operations center, combined operations center at their 4-star level, and we are embedding folks in there. But again, it's like, well, what systems are in there? It's like, because there are different flavors of Centric J. And so it's not just like one thing. It's like Centric J is just this like whole entity. Like, well, this thing talks to this, and these ones talk to this. But at echelon, at the like Western Army level and below, that doesn't tie back in. Like, you can't get that stuff directly back up to like MARFORPAC or USFJ with who those partners are sitting with at like an M&D level. And so that is part of our challenge when we started. I know General Smith was like, IMN, we'll talk about that later. I'm like, okay, sir. We can talk about IMN because if we're building something, it has to be inherently joint. It has to be inherently coalition.
Can you briefly talk about the concept of sustainment and the courses that are forward?
Difficult. I can't remember who it was talking. It may have been AJ this morning, Colonel Johnson, about ADO, access basing and overflight. We've got a construct called GPN, and I'm not for, nor do I claim to be one. But sustainment across the theater means you've got to have the partner has to agree to like this is what we're going to allow or not allow you to have in there. So that can be something as simple as the different classes of supply, like bulk fuel, bulk water, repair parts, food, those types of things. When we start talking about things that blow up or get shot out of something, it becomes a different conversation. So it kind of gets down into a policy route, but really it's the same kind of thing. It's like, if you don't have enough stuff in forward locations, just like with the forward combat forces, if you don't have the capability to support and sustain those while they're forward, we've got to figure that out. That is a definite challenge, and I know that there are a number of entities that are looking at that. But that's part of the concept. And there was, in the Philippines, we had ecosites that are out there. It's like, okay, we coordinate this with Post Nation in the Philippines, and they said, you can put this type of stuff in these locations throughout the Philippines, archipelago. We'll put these things down. Well, but, PRC sees that, and I'll name the adversary. They see that, and that becomes a JDPI, the desired point of impact for a precision guided ammunition. So you got to be able to pick that stuff up and move. So mobility matters. We got this. We talk about sustainment. It's not just how much stuff and where. It's like, can I make sure that I can move that around so that it isn't put at risk? All right. I know I'm coming up I'm not out of time, but I do have to get up the hill because I'm on another damn panel. And I know you're in capable hands with these 4 cats that are sitting up there. Plus, these jokers that are sitting up here and trucks like me going through, part of my G6 directorate up at MARFORPAC. And so I know that when we talk about the Warfighter Council and everything else, they'll be able to chime in as well. And I know that I've engaged on a number of industry partners down on the floor, and so has Bob and the rest of the folks. But if you have not had an opportunity, as we look at, okay, what needs to follow on with this? These are the folks to be able to get with and go, okay, if you want to do a follow-on next month or a couple months from now, we're just continuing conversation on certain things that we are doing or things that weren't teased out during this session. I will throw them under the bus and say that they're available to coordinate going through. So, all right, with that, Bob, over to you.
Kill it! Oh, I needed my TO weapon. That's right. Wow, the stalwarts that are closing down TechNet. I love it. That's awesome. First, I want to start off by thanking our sponsors for doing this crazy harebrained idea that we had, because I don't believe that I can go island hopping, booth to booth, 20-minute meetings, and you can make sense of what my problem is, and I can make sense of what your capability is, and we can build a roadmap to get to where we need to go. And that doesn't happen in 20 minutes. And so I think we do a disservice to you, and by not building that permanent relationship and giving you an iterative process by which we can tell you, hey, these are exactly what I think we're going to work on in the next 6, 8, 10 months, and provide you opportunities to help us reduce that kill chain in the acquisition cycle. And I'm really passionate about it, and here's a little bit why. I started as a grunt. I was a finance Marine after that. I was a commo. I wasn't really good at any of those three, but after that I went to PP&O. I was the advocate for any Marine that was on the ground side for all command and control, and that was all 57 programs. I worked with guys like Rob back there, and as we were looking to find the best return on investment and find a way to keep these 57 programs somehow in sync. And then after that, I went to OSD China Policy, and from there, I was like, how can I counter China's development in technology in the economic sphere? And then I got out here and I saw where both of those worlds meet, and I got to tell you, that's a passionate place to be. And then, by the way, I also have a son that's an SIEW Marine out in the first island chain right now. That's kind of motivating. So this is going to be an iterative approach. We're going to do this as a team. I'm going to lay out a little bit how here soon. The other thing I'm going to ask you to do while we're here is do your homework. Don't come to us with a, hey, I got this really cool thing. I got this really cool thing that worked really well in CENTCOM. It's going to work great here. Okay, let's talk a little bit, nest it within Dynamis, where it fits, how it fits, and then let's find a target of opportunity to go after, whether it be a Raider fund or an Office of Strategic Capital. Let's work together. I will be your operational sponsor, and we'll go in the attack to close with and get those resources into folks like MCTSSA, TJ Johnson, after the guidance of Colonel Quinter on where it fits. And then we also have in the audience, we have the CTO of MARCOR Syscom, Luis Velasquez. Raise your hand. So that's the beauty. We're closing that acquisition kill chain, and I'm going to show you how. But real quick, we'll go over just from a MARFORPAC perspective a little bit about Dynamis, although I'm completely the wrong guy to be giving it because the inventor of Dynamis is right here to my right, Colonel Quinter, who drafted a vision, right? He drafted a vision that we're in execution of right now. And the really cool part about it is when he sent it to me in draft, I read it, and he said, what do you think? I was like, service is going to hate it. I said, but I love it. Because it made us turn on a dime on so many things. We'll talk about that a little bit today. How Dynamis has matured is, we talked a little bit about kill chains earlier, and what you saw is there's no one kill chain that a Marine senses, a Marine makes sense, and a Marine acts. We rely on our allies and partners for magazine depth, for their sensing capabilities. We rely on the Joint Force for their magazine depth, and as we quarterback this fight for them, because when the balloon goes up, you got submarines, SOF, and Marines. Those are the folks in the first island chain, and we've got to put this picture together for the rest of the Joint Force and our allies and partners. Key about Dynamis, as it's matured, we know we need to nest with Overmatch. We need to leverage, and Overmatch is the Navy's CJAD C2 effort. We talked a little bit about where we fit underneath PAC Fleet. Colonel Hussey just talked about that. That's why it's key to us that if we're not nested, not only is it cost more, we become irrelevant. And then we also need to leverage the Joint Staff and the J6, because so many of the things we're doing here is not just the GCC fight. I guess I'm the next slide guy. There you go. Okay. So nested with PAC Fleet and the GCC, and then Fight the Maritime Operations Center. Why? Because that's PAC Fleet's effort in their JFN-like program, the program nested under JFN. That effort is a DOTM LPF effort. It's how they're looking at going after the prototype, scale, retire, new idea, prototype, scale, retire, and we're in lockstep and in sync with them. And as my boss hit on, 2/3 of our service is directly tied to this GCC, and that provides a unique opportunity. It's no longer we're going to go into CENTCOM on a rotational basis and have to adapt to that theater and then come back out and go back out to being part of the MAGTAF. We're not like that anymore. This is 2/3 of the service now adapting and being able to fight and ready all the time in one theater, ready to go. And so that provides us opportunity where we can get the entire service on the same page. And then lastly, I mentioned Fight the Mock. Fight the Mock is not a GCC thing. The Navy's looking, it doesn't matter whether it's 7th Fleet, what fleet it is, that's a global capability. So I just wanted to hit one thing here, because as we talk about multi-domain, I'm sorry, thanks. As we talk about all domain combined arms, what's changed, right? You think about the OEF, OIF mindset. We didn't worry too much about emitting, right? And now everything we do is an emitter, whether it's a signal, whether it's a physical footprint, whether it's a heat map, it doesn't matter. Everything we do, our strategic competitor has the ability to, is to track that capability. So we need to get out of the mindset that this is a defensive posture that we are assuming because of their capabilities. You know, we're Marines, we take things on the offensive, and this is a maneuver space. And we need to get ready as we put together our kill chains and understand the ability, where we can maneuver and where we can force maneuver. So here I just want to talk about some of the challenges here. You're talking about an integration of kinetic and non-kinetic effects, right? In the challenges that we already talked a little bit about, the different echelons, there are many cases where the capabilities at an echelon 4 is not far off than an echelon 2 unit, and where all you got to do is just add 3-star, and we've got an echelon 2 command, right? So times are different. The other thing is you look at the, and I see a lot of people taking pictures of this. I'm going to try to get these slides to where they can be made available to you. So as you look at like an echelon 6 sensor, maybe that sensor doesn't need to feed echelon 5, and then that 5 feeds echelon 4, and then maybe that 4 feeds echelon 3. Like logical and physical connection doesn't matter. We've got to maneuver. Some of our capability gaps. We got gaps in our in SCI and SAP clearances. The ability to have spaces where we can conduct those operations forward, in the ability to conduct those communications on those networks, particularly at our lower echelons. We got the ability, or the gap in the ability to conduct spectrum warfare and management, right? Because, hang on, there we go. Because again, everything is an emitter. So that provides us opportunity space. Provides us opportunity space in decoys, false emitters, organic SIGMAN. That gap, being able to have that down to the lower echelon, because you're not going to employ that at echelon 3. You're not going to employ that as much at echelon 2. We need to be able to have our strategic competitor question what they see. Air and missile defense integration with long-range fires, and being able to do that without sounding the alarm across the whole theater that says, look, here I am. Another gap in artificial intelligence and being able to power our decision making. We talked about a lot of that, a lot of parses and pieces of that this week, and that industry is getting after it and outcycling us. And we need to provide you opportunities to demonstrate that in an operational capability, in an operation, not an exercise, meant to deliver an effect, and that we can measure what that capability actually provided to the force. Sensing and spectrum, linking to cyberspace and cyber operations, it's a multi-domain fight. It's really tough when I have an Echelon 6 capability that might be able to influence the space domain, and I'm trying to do other non-kinetic operations, and I can't synchronize those fires. Because what happens when I have units operating completely off of intent, and there's a misfire? They fire that strategic weapon based off of intent, and now we have a strategic competitor that has a misperception of what's going on, and that leads to escalation that's unintended, and we've got to be really careful with that, and it's another reason why we just need to tighten up our kill chains. And as you look at capabilities and how you're delivering effects, because that's what you are doing, that's what you go to work every day to do, to focus on the effect that you're going to help deliver. Think about it through the find, fix, track, target, engage, and assess. And you'll have the opportunity here soon to talk to these gentlemen about those specifics. Okay, so we talked a little bit about GCC and opportunities. GCC also provides challenges, right? So you talk about the Joint Fires Network and Indo-PACOM Mission Network. Critical for us to share data with our allies and partners and combine those effects that I was just talking about. Combine those fires that I was just talking about. Okay, but the problem with that is I have a service that goes through a 5-year process to deliver a capability. I'm in a GCC that's fed to deliver a capability in 18 months, right? And you can see how that would begin to diverge between service, which in this case is 2/3 of the service, and the GCC. And so that's what makes it so important for us to work together in an iterative process that again, we're going to continue to go over. This is not the last time you're going to see me. We're going to have this discussion again in February, and I'm going to owe you progress on where we are and where we're not. And I'm beholden to you. You hold my feet to the fire. I'm really serious about this. Okay, so this is kind of how I see it, how we drive effects, you and me, into the service. So leveraging GCC capabilities, we leverage opportunities through OSD, Office of Strategic Capital, we leverage the Raider funds, we leverage S&T dollars. We work together to figure out how we get the capability that you're focused on achieving those effects with us, and work and roadmap the process. That takes you having to do some homework, unfortunately, but being able to work this process where we're defining the problem, working with the DCI war room. If you don't know the CTO, Astro Murray, and his team, it's a great entry point into this process. The second one I would say is working with McWill and making sure that they understand where it fits in the roadmap, and working with me and working with TJ. And so what we do there is we define what you think you can solve and how you think you can solve it, and we help prioritize that based on the operations we're running, where we can affect those effects in, and in that iterative approach, we will let out the RFI to industry. We will then conduct prototyping of that capability, just like TJ is going to give you an excellent example where we've already executed this and proven that it works. Did I have a question?
Yes, sir. Kevin Supertire, Chief 0699. So with this, I understand 2/3 of the force make up MARFORPAC. Marine Corps being the administrative portion, MARFORPAC, Indo-PACOM being the operational force. When we're testing and delivering these capabilities, is the end state to meet programs of record, or is the end state to meet the operational commitments?
So that's a really great question, and I think Go back to Colonel Hussey's discussion on the Marine Corps planning guidance, or the Commonwealth's planning guidance. He used a key phrase in there: we will fight with prototypes. That's direction to me. I don't think we need more clear direction than that. Now, to your point, after we conduct operational tests and we decide that we are going to scale, you have a capability that's going to close an information exchange requirement. You know, or you're going to, you have a better sensor. You have something we've decided, let's go after this. Working with MCTSSA and MARFORPAC, that's when we shift into that next phase of scaling. Scaling doesn't mean everybody, right? We're working with one capability now that's going to change how we fight. TJ will get into it. We really only needed 10 or 12 of them. Massive capability of change how the battlefield looks and how we exchange data through multiple echelons. Okay, so once we achieve what we think the end state of that is, we move out of the minimum viable product of that into something we could scale. We then begin to look at how does that affect the other programs of record. We become good stewards back to the service and say, hey, you had a capability that's going to deliver in 28. Working with industry here, or you have a capability that you have in draft ICD. We've been able to outcycle you thanks to, you know, we'll give credit to the GCC, right? And being able to help give us a little bit of access basing and overflight that we wouldn't normally have, right? And then we find a way to go back with them with recommendations to say, hey, we're going to lower these TEs at this echelon. Here's a toker. Keep the cost savings, wrap it back into our prototype process. And that's my intent, and we're already doing that with one area. The discussion's already happening at CD&I based off of a capability that TJ was able to deliver so effectively. And that's amazing, right? And so we're going to continue to do that. We're going to outcycle as fast as you can help. As soon as you can do your homework, find that area that we can go after. Because remember, I'm not an acquisition guy, although I've got a lot of acquisition experience. I can't let contracts. I mean, I could work around some organizations, right? But that's not my job. You got to bring me the pot of money we got to go after. There's a lot of them. You all know at least one of them. And I will be your operational sponsor. We'll go in the attack. We'll secure the resources. And yeah, I mean, depending on what it is, you bring me the right thing and it's a high ROI, I will advocate with the service. I'll do whatever I can, right? But this is a partnership and I need you to do some of the homework because I don't have an acquisition command below me, right? They're operationally focused, they're achieving effects, so I really need your help in doing that homework.
Hey, Bob, can we clarify something? So the question was about, we're going to fight with prototypes, right?
Yep.
I'm assuming that doesn't mean we're going to push the risk onto the Marine about what that prototype is. Can you speak a little bit to the deliberate process of de-risking the capability and the customer feedback loop, but from your perspective, how important that is?
Yeah, so going back, so you see the iterative approach. I could have probably taken that iteration and done it between defining and prototyping as well, because and TJ will get into this in the instance that he was able to put together. But yeah, there was a lot of back and forth. Quite honestly, I could have just put a circle in the middle and put FMFPAC in it, because we're involved all through the process, and we're making the decision based off of results on what risks we're willing to assume and where that capability lies and the criticality of it in the kill chain, right? So that's going to be a risk assessment.
Hey Bob, can I drop in real quick? So when we talk about some of the de-risking, we talk about some of that piece. That's where MCTSSA Marine Corps technical support activity lives. So I won't go all the way into. I'll wait for my part. But the one thing that we are working is that technical de-risking, because of our ability to do rigorous testing and that cadre of folks that we have. It is bringing those prototypes into that space, going through that rigorous process, and then looking at saying, here's where we see the technical risk. And then we work with Third MLR and said, hey, here's what we know are you willing to take the risk on the parts that are out there to get after an effect? And then we were able to do that kind of work. And it was we are helping to inform the risk that we're going to put onto a commander. So it's not just, hey, here's this cool thing, look at these lightsabers and just go. It's like, no, you're probably going to poke your eye out if you point it that way, right? So it's that kind of thing. But what we're doing now that we haven't done in the past is the rate in which we are doing it, the speed in which we're doing it, and the touch points that we've had with the FMF that we haven't had in the past because we were following a more traditional acquisition cycle where it is, we would do our testing, that testing would go to a program office would do the things they needed to do to get software or hardware delivered, and then that first touch point would be after all of that engineering work, or all that test work is done. Now it's a lot more side by side. We're seeing it together. So that's helping to get some speed there.
Yeah, and I love the iterative cycle. It's the warfighter feedback of that demonstration, of that prototype that's critical, right? To shape requirements, to shape the POM cycle, to shape the programs of record. And what you're seeing is the aggression here, right, around how we do that. Not hiding behind our requirements, not hiding behind the POM, not hiding behind the program of record, mid-tier acquisitions and all, but really leaning into that void and saying, we have the warfighters here. We have to put them front and center, right? We have to have their feedback loops, right, as we evaluate that. Understand the risk and the risk that we're accepting on their behalf.
Perfect. Thanks.
Get another question up there, sir.
Other question?
So for these prototypes that we're fighting with, how are you guys handling like ATOs? Stuff like that. Are you guys dealing with that?
So we are working with C4 as we go through that. Again, it's a whole of service effort. It's not just a bunch of individuals. It's not just, hey, we think it's a good idea, we're going to put it on the network. Because obviously we know that anything that we put on the network, this is something we were very concerned about during the experimentation phase of last year, is that we're going to put this prototype in the first island chain where our adversaries know where we're operating. So they're going to put whole of nation capabilities on whatever's out there, doesn't matter what it is. So we made sure that we have a cyber blue team at MCTSSA, so we go through that cyber blue team process first. Then we actually then coordinate those results with DCI, with IC4, and then we get those IATTs or ATOs, and we're having a conversation at the informed level. That's part of when we talk about that rigorous approach, that's part of the risk assessment that we're doing. So we're doing things our approach is at the informed level, which is different than what we've done in the past.
And the only thing I'd add to that, MARFORPAC just became an SCA, which basically means we do everything right up to the AO signature, and I've got a team of 5 guys that's what they do. So we will be directly in support of TJ as we work with the service to get these things across the line. So incredible capabilities.
So last question. So
Yeah.
in regards to the ATO and the IT crash request and you verifying, so is MCTSSA now going to be part of that acquisition group now for these prototypes now? So, I mean, before MCTSSA really wouldn't be part unless we decided to.
So they certainly are a center of gravity, yes. There are capabilities like Bedlam out of SCO, other opportunities they may not necessarily fall directly within MCTSSA. I would say for the lion's share, 70–80%, TJ himself is probably leading it. So again, why we ask you to do your homework so that he doesn't have a staff to reach down into. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, right? This is just an intro of the iterative approach that battle rhythm we're beginning to do. And I think what we may do is, as this matures, as we get feedback from you and we look at things that may be a little bit more mature than other areas, we may make the decision that, hey, we're going to do one of these sessions we're going to do is just a deep dive on that one specific capability. But you know, we'll figure this out together. I want your ideas, right? So actually, another question?
Yeah, the focus on joint fires is really clear, but that's great until you run out of your magazine of prototypes. So Admiral Picaro talked today about a joint sustainment network, sustaining the Marines. Are you thinking about applications on the joint sustainment network, and are those of interest to you as well?
Yeah, global positioning network is absolutely 1,000% a main effort. It's, yeah. I can't do that question justice, unless we did like 15 minutes and laid out the EDCA sites and laid out the flow, and of course we're all tracking interior needed distance, but we do work directly with the 4, and that's where AI fits into a lot of this too, from my perspective. You have programs like the MORT program and other capabilities that where you need to find those high return on investment opportunities to get them operationalized. And you know what the interesting part about GPN, anytime one of those sites becomes a smoking hole, we need the instantaneous ability to be able to understand now what the new route is, the new, what the impact of the battlefield. And that's not just for the Marine Corps, that's joint logistics across the theater. I don't think there ought to be just a Marine Corps database. That means, that this is a theater fight.
Sir, for kind of an attempt to answer your question from a second ago, it's like a vicious cycle, right? I mean, we used to work in the Joint Staff and Requirements Division in the J6. My predecessor is sitting right there, just put his hand up. And we would work the capability gap assessment for the chairman. Obviously, the number one capability gap inside INDOPACOM, well, actually in all of DoD right now, is the Joint Fires Network. And that's how it became a program of record a few weeks ago. It's now an Air Force program of record. The Air Force is now the executive agent for JFN. I think that it is a gift if you can explain difficult things to people that don't understand technology. And there's a generation gap between our senior leaders right now and our Lieutenant Colonel Logans. I say that because you and I are probably like 5 or 6 years, and same thing, Tommy, like your generation is more technically savvy than mine. We're probably in the middle somewhere. We are that voice translation device, so if you can explain these really technically challenging problems to our senior leaders, you have a better chance of getting on the list. So if you didn't know this, the dirty little secret inside the JROC is we only work the top 10 capability gaps for each service, and we only work the top 10 capability gaps for each functional and geographic combatant command. Guess how many of those are in the Marine Corps' top 10? None. JFN's not even in the top 10 for the Marine Corps. Why? Because in some cases, we need to be able to explain extremely technically challenging problems to people that don't have a C4 or cyber background or an intel background like Colonel Hussey. That's not hard to, or not easy to do. Marines naturally, raise your hand if you were a Marine. This will resonate with you. We like to talk about guns and blowing stuff up. We don't like to talk about networks and cyber and stuff like that. We're getting better and better and better at it. Information's a warfighting function now in the Marine Corps, but it's a real challenge. It's not, people who wear our uniform don't gravitate to talking about cyber fires and networks and MCN and MCN-S. But if you look at what we're trying to accomplish with a modern kill chain, with the CJAT-2 strategy and sensing and making sense and acting, the actual kill chain is going to be closed on a live network. Not with somebody's trigger finger. If you can't explain that in a way that resonates to general officers and flag officers, then your value proposition goes down orders of magnitude ×5. You're just not useful as a commo or a cyber officer if you can't do that anymore, because that's why it's not in the top 10. I'm not convinced that all of our senior leaders even understand this stuff well enough to explain it. Just like, why do we need 5G? Over to you. We know why we need 7.62. We know why we need, long-range fires. We know why we need the MLR. We're really good at explaining that. So I'm not poking fun at anybody or overestimating what I'm trying to say. But it's a problem. We have a very, very difficult time telling industry what we need. So I call it reverse requirements development. The reason why we're willing to fight with prototypes is because the technology that we're advocating for is mature already. And industry is waiting for us to figure out what it is we need. If you're waiting for the JSIDS process the JSIDS process works, right, Brett? It wasn't designed to be fast. It was designed to be responsible with taxpayer money. Fast and responsible, they typically aren't the same thing. You get different results, right? Hard and fast is how you crash aircraft when you fly them before they're ready. We don't let brand new pilots get in test aircraft, right? So it's just a way to think about it. JFN and the requirements that will be necessary to achieve CJAD C2, they're not in the Marine Corps' top 10, and we are fighting. That's one of the reasons why we're so interested in talking to industry. We're fighting to get some of these conversations elevated up in level of importance. And I'm not saying that our senior leaders don't think it's important. I'm just saying it's hard to explain it to people that don't have a background in C4 and cyber. So hopefully that's helpful, sir.
Any other questions? All right, well, I hope during this short little period that you have a true belief that it's really my intent that we do this together. This is one team, one fight. You hear me say it all the time. I really mean it. We're in the attack together, and I need your help. Let's figure out these targets of opportunity. Let's figure out the money pools we can go after, and let's get in the attack. I really want to join forces. It's one team, one fight. I'm going to turn it over to you, TJ.
All right.
So I'm going to do a transition question for Colonel Quinter as TJ's coming up and I bring up the slide. 3 years ago, Colonel Quinter, you were a coalition of one, championing this, right? And 3 years later, you're standing here with MCTSSA, you're standing here with MARFORPAC CIO, right? Like taking that mantle, right, to this. Can you talk about the importance of that? To you personally, but also to the Marines in your command, right?
Yeah, sure. Everybody hear me okay? All right. So yeah, this started off as a paper in an idea. Sometimes in your career, you could argue to be in the right place at the right time, but I was in the J6 when we collectively, like all 500 of us, were working on the CJAD C2 strategy for the SecDef, and so had a front row seat to all the happenings inside the Pentagon between OSD CIO, the cyber advisor, the SecDef, and the Joint Staff J6, and all of the component, C4 cyber entities like Army G6, for instance, C4 in our case at Headquarters Marine Corps, DCI, within the requirements development process in the C4 Cyber FCB anyway, I think the last program we brought to the JROC was when Brett was there before me. It was Next Gen Tropo. And so the impetus behind me writing this paper was I was on the phone down to Quantico with CD&I, CDD in particular, asking them why they weren't in the meetings at the Pentagon. So the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Dr. Hicks, is basically responsible for CJAD C2 on behalf of the SecDef. The DDJ6 North, the 1-star, in our case it was General Parker for a while, and then Admiral Breyer Joyner took General Parker's place. General Crow was our J6, Marine 3-star. The 1-star sits over top that functional capabilities board. Well, no C4 cyber requirements went to the JROC in the 2 years that I worked on the Joint Staff. So just that alone should be alarming to everyone in this room, because that's basically, I'm saying no Marine Corps C4 cyber requirements. That means the Marine Corps is signaling to the chairman that we don't need any new technology on the C4 cyber side. We got it, everything's good. And so from my perspective, I'm a school-trained planner and a strategist, that's basically saying that the translation in my brain was we're gonna try to win the next war with the last war's technology. That might not be the best way to translate it, but that's what got me thinking. It's like, there's no way, there's so much technology we need. Like, our networks aren't ready to be able to accomplish zero trust architecture, identity credentialing and access management, post-quantum cryptography, and that's just the beginning. I'm not even talking about DevSecOps platforms like infrastructure platform, software as a service. I'm not talking about AI, machine learning, big data analytics, large language models, but our network's not cloud enabled. And so I know that it's not cloud enabled because the equipment in our formations is not powerful enough to handle a cloud environment at the edge of the network, right? So industry knows all this because they're listening to what the COCOM's saying about the Joint Fires Network and the Indo-PACOM Mission Network. And the reality of the situation is the program of record equipment we have in the fleet right now in our formations is the gear that we use to fight the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan the last 20 years, and it's gotten iteratively better over the course of the last 20 years.
let me pause you there.
So,
You know what?
I was going to add one comment real quick. So the interesting part about this whole discussion is that last CDD that was J-Rock approved, I have a memo in my inbox that Lieutenant Colonel Logan and I are working to divest of a significant portion of that AAO so that we can get cost savings to actually do what we need to do here in the future.
So I'll try to wrap it up so I don't give you too long-winded of an answer. But so our programs are getting better, but the question is, do you want to be evolutionary or do you want to be revolutionary? AI and machine learning is revolutionary technology. 5G is revolutionary technology. Anything that you do on the cloud is revolutionary technology. It changed your life forever in 2007, the day you got your first iPhone. The application programming interface is on here. What makes this device powerful and exquisite is the software applications and the OS on top on the system, not the hardware itself, right? So we're going to get there, but also the way we manage these programs is when you talk to people at CD&I, they get paid to come to work every day to manage existing programs of record. So to create a new program is always difficult. And that doesn't matter whether you're a Marine or whether you're Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Space Force. It's hard for everybody to create new programs of record. So as we come up with ideas, together, and like as you start to do your homework to answer Bob's question, read the paper, understand the lines of effort, and understand what technology we need. Because we are up against a wall in this. I mean, if the intel prognosticators that are saying we may be in another war by 2027, if that actually happens, we're going to be starting from a significant position of disadvantage because the technology that we need is not procured yet, much less fielded. And so we do need to work together. We do have to follow the law. Acquisition, we have a new software acquisition strategy as of about 3 years ago, and we are making progress in that light. But to your point, sir, about coalition partners, the only reason we can't talk to coalition partners has nothing to do with our equipment. The internet is the internet. It's policy. Can you or can you not share information with the Japanese? And what information? Over to you, people in the Pentagon, the right policy. That's not a warfighter's responsibility. There's zero things stopping us from talking. We either can share crypto or we can't. We can share information or we can't. That's for senior leaders to decide. But that's why we have 8,000 flavors of Centrix, and and we're running around with deploy kits and doing all this other stuff. Mission partner environment, which TJ will probably talk about, is supposed to get after that, which is show up, pay to play. Here's the requirement to be on MPE, coalition partner X. Meet this requirement, we can share information.
So we're going to cover more from Colonel Quinter, and what I really wanted to highlight is the human element here of leadership, right? As Jason was leaving the J-Rock, he's writing a paper, he's putting his thought leadership into this space. He's going to the mall at Miramar, and then he's getting selected for command. You don't get to carry that mantle. It takes other leaders to step in that void, right, to carry that mantle. And I see head nods in here, and there are other leaders in here as well, right, wherever you are, right, taking that thought leadership and that mission-first mindset, right, and stepping out in the void with us. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to TJ.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. First off, I think I echo Bob's comments. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. It is my honor to be here to present to you all. Again, my name is Thomas T.J. Johnson. I work at Marine Corps Tactical Systems Support Activity, known as MCTSSA. We are a subordinate element of Marine Corps Systems Command. We are part of the acquisition process for the Marine Corps. Our primary role is support to the warfighter. Most Marines, if you've ever heard of MCTSSA, if we're forward deployed with the Marines, right, we're the ones that provide that 24/7 support to the Marines. Our second mission is support to program offices. We do that through rigorous testing and evaluation of capabilities and making sure that they can meet cost schedule performance. Our third mission is support to Force Design, generally Force Design 2030 specifically. We have a memorandum of agreement with McWill, and we are the primary integration agency for experimentation for McWill, in support of McWill. So those are the three things that we do with about 300 folk, 150 Marines and 150 civilians. Within that, I work at headquarters. I support the technical director, and I service RFIs for our commanding officer. So that's kind of what I am. I have about 9 lines of effort. The one that's important to this is I'm the chief scientist for Project Dynamis in support of Deputy Commandant Information, so I work that piece. I'll give you a little bit of the background of the story because I'm kind of I have a weird reverse story. I was in industry for about 10 years. I worked for General Dynamics. I was a software developer for the F-22 program. I was a software developer for submarines, and I was a software developer for a system called Command Post of the Future. So for those of you that have used that, loved it or hated it, you're welcome. As part of that, I was also because of my background in radio, I also worked on a program called Unit Operations Center. They had a system called OAU. It was a nice little box. It was about this big, that heavy. It was supposed to field in 2008. So I'm telling you the C story because it makes sense for you guys. It was supposed to field in 2008. We had a little thing pop off called OIF, and everybody said, hey, we need all this new technology now. So we dumped in about, I think 3 or 4 UOCs at the time. And they said, hey, we need this software is crap, and we need a software developer to go to Fallujah to help make sure this code stays online. And I was the last person on the team. I walked in the door and I said, hey, we need a volunteer. Volunteer for what? That's you. So I ended up going to Fallujah in 2004 as a civilian, no military experience, no military background. Congratulations, you're in 3-5 now, and we're going downtown Fallujah. Make sure this radio stays online. So that was that. So I ended up, over the course of 5 years, I ended up staying in Iraq and Afghanistan for 5 years straight. I was moved between M&F West over to Baghdad. I was with Colonel Corelli, or General Corelli, General Nero, General Petraeus. I was chopped over to Special Forces for a while. I was over at with Task Force, Task Force 77 for a while. I was chopped over again, over to the State Department, so I worked with the State Department for a while, chopped over to medical battalions. I said, hey, I'm done, I'm out of this, it's pretty cool. They said, hey, we need you to go to Hawaii because you've been doing this for a crazy long time. Why don't you go to RIMPAC, that's gonna be pretty soft. You'll get there with third Marines. Cool, I get there and then 3rd Marine gets activated and said, hey, we're going to Afghanistan. And hey, we need all the contractors that are here to go to Afghanistan with us. So I then ended up turning back around. And then I was in Afghanistan, I was in Kandahar, and at the time it was Tombstone for about 7 months working with that stuff. So again, after that I said, I'm out for real. And I said, hey, I went back to General Dynamics as a business developer there for a while. And what I realized is that the ability to support the Marines in a way that they needed, or just the Joint Force in general, I couldn't do that as working just for General Dynamics, to be able to do this with all the systems and all the capabilities. MCTSSA was basically a toy box where I could do all that work, where I could work with Raytheon products, where I could work with Lockheed Martin products, with General Dynamics products, things like that. So that was an opportunity for me to do that role. So I've been here at MCTSSA for about the last 14 years, so 10 years in industry, 5 of that 4 deployed, and then the last 14 years here, part of the government. So that's kind of, I have a weird, again, my story is weird because most people get out of the military and then they go, private industry. I did the reverse. But it gives me a unique perspective. The reason I bring that up, it gives me a unique perspective on what it means to, if you don't swim, you don't eat in industry. So I value the time and the presence of the things that you all present out to me, because I know what it means and I know what you all have to do to feed the beast within your own individual organizations and companies. So we like to respect that time. So that also gave you guys enough time to read the thing behind me. So we'll talk about Project Dynamis. Project Dynamis within CJAD C2, Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control. I'm pretty sure most of the people in this room know what that is, but I'll give you the definition as I understand it. It's the ability for any sensor to reach any shooter, whether that is naval, joint, combined, and that is also talking about being able to deliver kinetic and non-kinetic effects. Right? Again, if you looked at the first slide that Colonel Hussey put out there, the goal is deterrence. Right? If we start letting rockets off rails, we've already lost. And anybody that talks to me already says that. Again, there's a couple of unclassified simulations that are out there that kind of talk about what the first 24 hours of any engagement with China or a peer looks like. It's not healthy for anyone in that first 12 to 24 hours. So we don't want to get to that point. We want to get to the point where we continue to go to conventions like this, and we all have a good time over the course of the week, and we all go back home. We do that year after year after year after year. That's when we don't fight, that's when the Marines are actually winning in Indo-PACOM. So as we look at our technology, we need to make sure our technology is able to ensure deterrence. And we just ensure deterrence by making sure that that information is available at need, so when deterrence fails, we're able to punish with speed and violence. It's just that's how it works. That's the game. So as we look at this, again, through CJIC2, there are 4 initiatives. Each service has an initiative, right? Again, the Army has Project Convergence, the Air Force has ABMS, the Navy has Overmatch and Dynamis. Dynamis is a component of Project Overmatch, right? So what Project Overmatch is really concerned about is the naval solution, the naval solution, and they're really outside, but mostly it's ensuring persistent comms and ensuring that we get information outside the WES. Dynamis is hyper-focused on inside the WES, the weapon engagement zone, right? So that's primarily a Marine fight with special operators embedded in that. So we work very closely with our partners over in Coronado. So a lot of work we do there. So you look at the key focus there. Key focus, again, integration and support to the Joint Fires Network. I think you heard from Colonel Quinter, you heard from Bob, I think you heard from Colonel Hussey. Again, the Joint Fires Network is how the combatant commander is going to fight that fight in this AOR. And if you're not talking to, you're not integrated with, you're not sharing, contributing to that Joint Fires Network, the value proposition of your service is very, very low. So we need to be able to make sure that we have technologies that allow us to do that. That's going to be technology that's going to be associated with data centricity. It's going to be information that's with zero trust. It's going to be able to be mission partner. It's going to be able to share with their joint partners, right? Those are the types of things. How do I move that piece of data that forward deployed Marine unit, whether it's MLR, whether it's recon, whether it's ENCO, whatever it is that's out there, right? How can they move that data into that space and help to inform that combatant commander to hold our adversary at risk? That's number 1. Number 2, support the orchestration of the service level experimentation plan for CJIC2. That is working by with and through the MARFORs, MARFORPAC, MARFORCOM, MARFOREUR. Again, if you look at it from a joint perspective, the joint staff sees this fight as a global fight, right? Obviously, we're here in Hawaii, we're having a great time right now, but if you're looking around, there's 2 hot wars that are actually happening right now. We have one that's happening in Ukraine. We have something that's going on in the Red Sea. Those are active activities, and if you look around, you don't have to look very hard, we know that our adversaries are leveraging each other's capabilities in that space. We see that, you can see that in the public reporting. So when we look at that service, when we look at how does the service contribute or gain information from the experimentation that's going on across the department. And I'll give some examples about that here shortly. Drive naval, joint, and coalition interoperability. I won't go into that again. We've heard it over and over again. I think we've heard it from Colonel Quinter, Colonel Hussey, from Bob. That is going to be part of it. So as you're looking at your solutions, and we're looking at complementary solutions, if you're already working with someone, that's who we want. We want to know how to extend that. Let's say that you have a contract with the Navy, and there's a list of 10 things that they want to get after, but they can only fund 8 of those things. Well, hey, maybe those other 2, maybe I definitely don't have money for 10. I didn't probably have money for 3, right? But if there's the 2 things, maybe the Marine Corps can leverage that and then extend what's already out there, right? How do we do that? And then ultimately, I think to go back to some of the questions, at the end of the day, we're going to fight with prototypes, but we're going to sustain with programs of record, right? We're looking at prototypes because we have a very discrete timeline, and we're looking at various discrete threats. So prototypes are the way to get there. It's just, our adversaries are not going to wait for the palm cycle. It's like, oh, they're not funded till 27. Okay, everybody pause, right? Nobody's going to do that, right? So, but as we look at what gets validated through the process, those are the things that we look at informing programs of record. And we'll talk about that through the MAG-TAF-C2 MVP work that we've done. So I'm gonna walk over here. I'm a hands person. So hopefully you guys can still hear me. So as we look at this over here, you can see here, we talk about doing your homework. Doing your homework is looking at any of the service level, not just from the Marine Corps, but service level guidance, right? So we look at documents like Force Design 2030. That's a publicly available document. If you're not reading that, and I'm not just saying just to the BD folks in here, your engineers need to understand that too. Because if you're gonna put somebody in the Marine Corps space and they don't understand Force Design 2030, they're not interested in the problem, and the Marine Corps is not gonna be interested in you. It's just that easy. So as we talk about that, Force Design 2030 came out in June of last year, June 26th, last year. There's several directed actions in there. Directed action number 2 is the one that we're going to talk about right now. Directed action 2 talks about that we will combine the air, ground, and C2 family of systems and FITSI, family of integrated targeting cells. We will deliberately integrate with the Joint Fires Network and INDOPACOM, and we will drive convergence of disparate air, ground, C2 systems into an all-domain MAGTF C2 capability. That's what it says, and that's what we've been acting on out of MCTSSA. So June 28th, June 26th that came out, June 28th, we had a meeting with McWill. We came up with a concept. We iterated that concept from June of last year to about February, and then we demonstrated it with McWill and Project Convergence. We took all those critical kill web capabilities, we put them onto a smaller form factor box, and then to give you guys some sense of it, again, one of our requirements is one of our limitations is organic lift, right? I have an advanced persistent adversary that's going to be able to knock anything that goes in the air, right? If it spins, if it makes noise, if it does anything like that, they're going to try and target it. So that means that I need to be as quick and as efficient as possible. Our current communication system, the Combat Data Network, weighs 1,200 pounds. That's the gross weight. We were able to take all that information, CSC2S, I don't even know how ungodly big that thing is.
Yeah. It's on the back of a Humvee.
It's on the back of a Humvee, right? So it's a couple tons, right? So we were able to take the critical capabilities from those things that are a couple of, I'd say probably altogether, right, 4 to 5 tons worth of gear, right? We were able to shrink that down to about 77 pounds, right? And we were able to hold adversaries at risk. We were able to demonstrate that Project Convergence. We were able to mature that with multiple iterations with third MLR, and then they were able to employ it successfully in Balance Shield. So we went from February to May. What you're not seeing here, we also sent another one out to MARFORPAC. They were also able to employ that in an exercise called CWIX in Poland, right? So we were intentional in sending the prototypes of 2 different use cases to see how they would inform, you know, is it an anomaly because third MLR has the smartest people in the room, right? Or is it something that could scale, right, from a co-company? So we were able to see both. Then we had Gray Flag, right, and then we have Bold Quest right now. I have a prototype that's out right now in Camp Lejeune, right, that is now taking some things we've learned from the things we did in Valiant Shield and Gray Flag. We have that is now has a data-centric capability that's focused on those zero trust targets that the DoD has sent out. That's another homework assignment. If you don't understand the zero trust targets that the DoD has for us, you need to understand those, right, because we have an executive order that says that by 27, the entire, I think the whole of government.
Whole federal government.
The whole federal government has to be zero trust enabled, right? Nobody, again, to your point, nobody's palming for that. And if they do palm for that, they'll start the work in 27. I talked about 15 vendors today that said they got a zero trust solution right now, right? So why do I need to wait till 27? That makes no sense. When we talk about fighting with prototypes, let's bring that zero trust capability into the ecosystem. Let's integrate it with our programs of record. Say, hey, can I be able to target, hold an adversary at risk, right? So we talk about that. Steel Knight we have coming up, and then where I think is going to be important for industry, we talk about experimentation CY25, right? That's where we're going to start actively looking at, hey, what are the things that we can get after? What are the things we work with MARFORPAC? What are the things we work with MACG, right? What are the things we work with the MSCs? What are the things that they need to do? What are the cats they need to herd? So those are the things that we're looking at in the CY25. The other part about this and so the other question, how do you guys play? How do you play in 25, right? There's a couple of ways that we want that, at least my perspective on how you want to do that. What I also do, and this is really talking to Luis Velasquez over here, right, as our CTO, right, cooperative research agreements, right, CRADAs, right? So right now we have a series of CRADAs that we have out right now. Part of our MAGTF C2 MVP has been informed by our CRADA with Ultra Electronics. We were able to leverage them, again, to use some of our technology, but they were also able to leverage us to improve their products. So that's a successful example that we want to scale in 25, right? So what that does for us is, the way that we'll work that out is we're gonna have some RFIs that we send out. In your RFI responses, if you're willing to do CRADAs, let's talk about what you wanna do, right? CRADAs are cooperative in nature. That means it's something that you want to get out of it. It's not serving for us, it's bi-directional. So some of the things that we do through that CRADA work that we've done with them is that they bring their capabilities out to our government spaces, they get integrated to our government labs, and then we do a cyber assessment of them, right? And then we hand them back the results. Here's a blue team cyber assessment of your product. And then they can put that into their backlog, right? That's what the government's delivering to them, and then we get to deliver on the backside. It's like we can go talk to the MLR and say, hey, we need to really be able to do J9 messages in a different way than we're doing before, right? Okay, cool. I don't need your product to be perfect. I need your product to do that one specific thing as part of the prototype to make sure that we can do that. Then I can say, hey, this technically works. It doesn't violate the law of physics. It's not illegal, and it's not stupid, right? And it's those things, that's how I inform the program of record. I say, here's the technical results of what we've done, and then we've also validated that with a live experimentation and exercise. And we did that over and over and over and over and over again, right? And now we have a capability that now CD&I is now looking at and saying, hey, that probably looks like what we wanted to do. Now when they put RFPs and RFQs out there, your capabilities are already, we're now not guessing, right? We're now not guessing. It's an intelligent RFP. It's an intelligent RFQ, right? You've all seen RFPs that come out, and you can tell that the person that wrote it doesn't know what they're talking about. You can see it. You're like, oh, that's an idiot, right? So, but you know, you're going to bid for it anyway, right? Because you got to, right? But now you got to figure out how to re-engineer what that person clearly didn't understand, and we don't understand, right? So that's what we need. That's where we need industry. As I tell people, right? You'll hear the term "we're building the plane as we're flying." That assumes that you've got pilots, right? We're building planes as we're free falling, right? So how do we do that? How do we get after that? So what I will say is that what the government provides in these kind of agreements and this kind of relationship is we have the ability to have continuity, right? So again, to become experts at the level that Bob is, right? He's dedicated his entire career to that, right? But we can't scale, right? So Bob understands the threat in INDOPACOM better than probably any human being on the planet, right? But he can't get if he said, I need 5 of these types of people, he's not gonna get those 5 types of people through the government in a reasonable way. But I can turn to my industry partner and say, hey, I need 5 experts on zero trust. I need another expert on 5G. I need another expert. And you all can turn around and do that in 3 weeks and get top tier talent to help solve these problems. So that's why we want to have, that's why it's a partnership. That's how we're looking at this. And then the end game for everybody is that when we do this, we respond to the RFI, we go through some of this creative stuff. Even if you don't get selected for these RFIs per se, the fact that you submit it to them, when we start looking at stuff and start saying, hey, we want to look at this solution, we have a pedigree, and it indemnifies both industry and it indemnifies the government, so that when we decide to make something and someone says, oh, well, you selected those guys' stuff and they were in your spaces for 6 months, so obviously it had unfair advantage. No, they didn't. They followed the process, right? And everything that we've done is documented, everything we're doing, so that way it makes it easier and faster for us, because we don't go into things like a contract protest because we didn't have it's not the technology, it's because you don't have your paperwork together that gets you slowed down every single time. It's never the technology, it's paperwork. So what we've advanced in this whole thing is we just figure out how to read the papers. That's really that's not technology, it's read the document, follow the rules.
Hey, can I
Anyway,
add something?
go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of add something in just for context. So when I conceived this idea from the beginning, it was with the assumption that we would, the Marine Corps would approach this problem institutionally with in search of a bespoke solution. I say that because it's not a surprise. You know, we palm along service lines, and so we have very few success stories across the Department of Defense of joint programs. F-35 is one of them. It's still new enough. We can't claim that it's good or bad. It's still kind of nebulous. But we needed 3 different types of F-35s, A, B, and Cs. We have the JLTV program. It's still new enough. We haven't fielded enough of them to be able to get into heavy maintenance to see if it's like working well or not working well. But when General Glavy took this bad boy from me, took it up to the service level and started advocating to the commandant for it, that's what it needed initially. I tell people this all the time. I wrote this paper for Major General Matos when he was the director of C4. We were going through Force Design 2030. The commandant centrally controlled advocacy at CD&I. The other deputy commandants were following CD&I's lead. At the time, CD&I was General Smith. He's now our commandant. You know, he went to became the ACMAC, then the commandant. So anyway, I tell you that for context because the way that we're approaching the problem now within INDOPACOM is we have the Joint Fires Network. It became a program of record like 2 weeks ago, and they made it is an Air Force program of record. The Air Force is the executive agent. Secretary Kendall was OSD R&E before he was the Secretary of the Air Force. He is the Secretary of the Air Force now. So that's maybe good, maybe bad. It's too early to tell. But why I'm telling you that is that sounds like a bespoke solution to me. Like, we still haven't put the J in Goldwater Nichols. Like, that was the 1986 legislation, right? If we were better at joint, we wouldn't need a CJATC2 strategy. It would just be happening. We palm along service lines and we buy what we want, and nobody what's law of the jungle in the Pentagon. 4 stars do what they want, and it's not about the money, it's all about the money. Those are the 2 most important things you have to learn within 1 week of working in the Pentagon, or you will not survive. Every conversation ends in a conversation about the water cooler, about money. Naturally, it's the Pentagon, right? So I'm telling you that because it's becoming a joint program office, JFN becoming an Air Force program of record, we being the Department of Defense through the vehicle in reverse. So I would have told you 12 months ago that what victory looked like at the end of 06 Command would be Control Group 18 not participating in supporting Project Convergence Capstone 5. It would be we were doing Project Dynamis instead of Project Convergence Capstone 5. When this came up to the service level, General Glavy and SES Murray decided we need to ride the coattails of the other services. We don't have enough money in the Marine Corps to pursue a solution to this on our own. And I said, I get it. That's a different way of attacking the same problem. And I'm a colonel, and I know who I work for. So at the end of the day, it may be an opportunity to go the other direction, the original direction. And I'm not saying we have to or we don't have to. The reason I'm telling you that is if you were a prime right now, like, it all depends on how you attack the problem, right? Everybody loves practical examples. How does Elon Musk solve problems? He just owns the entire kill chain. Like, people are like, we have a problem, we can't afford to launch rockets into space anymore. This is the United States' problem, right? He's like, it's fine. I'll make my own company, and I'll build my own rockets with my own boosters, and I'll do everything. I'll do the whole thing. I'll launch the rockets myself. They're like, you're crazy. If you're a prime out there right now, like GD, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, we can keep going on and on. You're one of the big ones, right? You could potentially come up with, I wrote a paper that has the technologies we're looking for in it. If you could come up with an end-to-end solution and sell that, you might make a lot of money from the entire Department of Defense, not just the Marine Corps. Because what we're doing right now is like, I'll take one of those, I'll take 2 of those, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, dial this up, dial that back, and then we'll see if it works. And so now what you're saying, like when you do it that way, you're trying to get all of MARCOR Syscom Command, every PEO, every program manager, you're trying to get all those people rowing in the same direction, right, Luis? I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's a lot harder. If somebody shows up like the elephant in the room and they're like, here's what you need, that's Elon Musk style, then we may get there faster as a service, DoD may get there faster, but that's typically not how we solve problems. But I think right now it's too early to say whether what they decided in terms of making it a program is going to work or not. But I will tell you this, watching how Next Gen Tropo went down in the C4 Cyber FCB, we couldn't get the Army to when we replaced the Tropo scatter in the Marine Corps with the Track 170s with the new program record, which is called Next Gen Tropo, the Army refused to meet certain KPPs for that Next Gen Tropo system because it didn't matter to them. We had a problem with Com Squadron 18 in Okinawa needing to be able to propagate in certain parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, which was a Marine Corps problem as far as the Army's concerned, because like, well, we don't have that problem. Turns out we don't have any Track 170s in Oki, so we're cool. And it had to go all the way to the J-ROC because of that. And so that's what happens inside the Pentagon when everybody's kind of just running with scissors, trying to buy their own version of the same thing. So if you want to look at a champion for what right might look like, it's the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability Contract, which the primes are Google, Oracle, AWS, and Microsoft. And there's performance parameters. Don't live up to the performance parameters, you're kicked off the contract. It's a $10 billion contract. So JFN may want to go in that direction, to try to get what right looks like faster and to use our military information complex, the strengths of our country, like to the maximum extent possible. because the strength of our country is our innovation. It's why our economy is booming despite the fact we have ridiculous inflation right now. The economists can't figure it out. I'll tell you what the answer is. It's innovation. That's what we're really, really good at in this country. So if we could capitalize on that, and there's a company in the audience here that can go end to end, you may be your lucky day. That's a faster way to the finish line than trying to do one thing at a time. Because I've said this from the very beginning for the last 3 years. Luis, we talked about this 2 years ago. If you gave me one each of the technologies that we need to do this, and I prove to you that it works, it'll be this powerful. You'll change your mind about what's possible. Because I say all sorts of crazy things. I don't think people believe me, but like I think we should get rid of single channel radio completely. Except maybe HF in case there's a nuclear holocaust. That's the only thing I would advocate keeping. This is your voice device now in your personal life. Why do you accept anything less than that with your military equipment? Anybody want to trade your phone for a Prick 117 Golf? I make my point. So
I wanted to open up the floor. I know we kind of went for a while. Anybody got any questions on anything we've seen so far?
So you just mentioned, sir, that end-to-end would be a great way of tackling a lot of these problems, but it seems like systems command is sort of going in the opposite direction, where they were going to primes for big system integration efforts before, now they're going that way. They're just buying components and doing the integration themselves. Can you kind of, I guess, clarify that and remind the difference between what you say you want to attack versus what systems?
I'm not even saying, I'm just throwing out ideas because that was what Bob said. You know, one of the benefits to us all being in the same room for more than just like 20 minutes today is we can share ideas. So as the people who deliver the solutions from industry to DoD, that is a way to attack it. I will tell you, one of the things that they're working really hard on at MARFORPAC Syscom right now, and I think it's great, is we're trying to commoditize hardware. So a router is a router, a switch is a switch, a laptop's a laptop. I remember like my hypothesis when I was sitting in Brett's old cubicle, which became my cubicle, for 4 months, like trying to write this paper, looking at the NetMod plan. I had to read it like 3 times because it's like, you know, it's like reading the Bible. You can only read like 1 page at a time because it's confusing and you don't understand it. The priest has to explain it to you. I would walk around like, hey, what's this mean? What's that mean? Walk over to C4. So I think that we know what my hypothesis, my research question was like, how much bandwidth is enough bandwidth? And how low does the latency need to be on the network? On MCTSSA for tactical comm formations in the Marine Corps. And I was like trying to answer that. I was asking Bobby, I'm like, we got any bandwidth studies from DISA or anything like that? And he's like, oh yeah, they do one like every couple years. But I couldn't answer my own question. I finally figured it out. You know what it is? We need enough to execute cloud at the tactical edge. And we should not overpay for any more than we need. That's the answer to the question, right? So I will tell you that with proliferated low Earth orbit, like Starshield, Kuiper will come online at some point, Viasat MMTs, Chimeta LMTs. The bandwidth and the latency that we're getting right now has, Joe, don't hate me for saying this, it has put teleports, like it's going to extinct DISA teleports unless they get on that model and we're made to go to the DISA model. So DISA's getting into the cloud business, but what I was going to say was we need the commodity hardware, and that's what MARFORPAC Syscom's doing. They're like, okay, they're doing that with the MAGTF C2 MVP. How much processing power is enough? How much storage is enough? Size, weight, power, end of discussion. And then let's just pick one. It doesn't matter. So hopefully that helps.
All right, so we're going to lead into a break right here for 15 minutes. You're going to come back in. We're going to have TJ and Colonel Quinter talking some more together. What I want to frame is what you saw at the bottom of the slide from TJ, right? It looks like experiments. It looks like demonstrations, right? What is it? It's a crawl, walk, run, sprint, okay? He's entering into the sprint stage of this experimentation on Dynamis. And that same methodology is what's going to follow in the data sharing that gets ingested, all right, in the experimentation. So we're going to be back in here at 15:15. Thank you.
If you like Dell, you like Dell or whatever, go on there and find your version of, because some people like microphones, some people like galaxies, everybody's got that. You need this much power, this much processing power, this much, some devices are going to need cellular.
Not a nick.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And you go and you start looking. Just put all Yeah. Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Having to deal with so many different types of acquisition roadblocks, not being able to get
Those guys you mentioned.
Yeah,
before
it's
you
tough.
ran-
I mean, we have to follow the law. So, and the law is not designed to be fast. It's designed to be responsible, and the taxpayers would have it no other way.
That's a very great point.
If that weren't the case, we would just be allowed to go buy whatever we want, and it works. And the proof that you have that it works is the fact that the DoD budget goes up every single year, and pretty soon in the next couple of years, the DoD budget will exceed $1 trillion a year. It's in the high 800 millions right now. It goes up every year. The president just asked for another $5 billion to this last in this last NDAA. So that's proof that the taxpayers trust the department to execute those funds responsibly. And so if you're rushing things to market, so to speak, we don't call it rushing it to market at DoD, but you're rushing stuff to get it in a Marine's hand, and then it fails, like an Osprey crashes. Or my dad ran the Osprey test program for 4 years, OPTEV 4 in Norfolk, Virginia. My dad was a Cobra pilot, and I'll tell you what, that's what wrong looks like. We tested that bird, and and the reason I say that is we put Marines in the back of the Osprey before that thing was ready, and they died. They crashed 3 times, and people died. And out in Yuma, an entire platoon died. And that type of thing's unacceptable. So we do need to take our time. The good news is, on the comm side, it's usually not that grave. Like, if the router doesn't work, it's like, is somebody going to die? Yeah, maybe. In the future, maybe. Because, like I said, the kill chain's going to get closed on live SIPRNet. So if the router doesn't work in 2030, it may very well result in somebody getting hurt.
Spectrum warfare is very prevalent, especially nowadays. The proliferation of all these different constellations. Being able to utilize, geostationary.
We don't have enough. There aren't enough people in the comm community right now in the Marine Corps that understand this technology well enough, and that is a massive problem. So what you didn't see, those aren't the original lines of effort for Project Dynamis. Those are Mr. Murray's key focus areas. He came up with those on his own. Loop 4 for Project Dynamis, the fourth line of operation is increase C4 cyber literacy. And that's just as relevant to the comm community as it is to non-comm communicators. I could line 100 combos up against this wall right now and tell them, give me a 5-minute class on how cloud works, and I would get blank stares. And so it's hard enough to be a commo or a comm chief anyway because of the breadth of knowledge you're required to know. Like, you guys are the same as the commos once you become a master sergeant and you become a 99, but you start off specialized and then you funnel in, and by the time you're a gunny or master sergeant, you're expected.
When I retired, I was the chief instructor for the combat force.
Yeah.
So I actually brought those individuals from the sergeants and staff from the gunnies up and how to be masters.
And the commos start off at that level as a second lieutenant.
Yep.
It's the longest ground MOS school in the Marine Corps. Comm officer course is 6 months long. So anyway, it's a challenge. We have a lot of work to do, and I didn't say this in front of everybody, but in my professional opinion, the comm community needs to be retired. They need to go away. It needs to become a data science community, and we don't need a comm community anymore. The technology that's available now is so exquisite that you don't need operators to operate it. Proof is this is all the proof I need. How old do you think my son was before he figured out how to get on this thing and watch Netflix? He was 3. You don't need an 18-year-old Lance Corporal to figure out how to use this technology. So, no, I'm just saying, like, the software is so sophisticated that you don't need an operator for it.
Well, anyways, sir, it was great.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
great talking to you. Yeah, best of luck to you too. If I don't see you, good to meet you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Are you just a pack or? Okay. Okay. So I don't know if you know, Colonel Delaney? The CEO, yeah. He's standing right back there. Yeah. Yeah. Glad, yep. It's very nice to meet you. Yeah. On Thunderdome or? I think cloud is the only thing that's going to keep DISA alive. I mean that sincerely. I'm not being mean. Teleports are dead. We don't need to use them anymore. They were great for decades. They served their purpose. We don't need them anymore. And so the $1 million question right now, so I have an IL5 instance in my ChatGPT lab at the Comm Squadron. The only reason I don't have an IL6 instance active right now is because there's an argument going on between DISA headquarters and headquarters Marine Corps about IL6. Whether we should be allowed to have a single or multi-tenancy. And I believe, nobody paid me to say this, but I believe the reason why the DISA commander, the 3-star, is arguing so aggressively is because if he doesn't win that argument, we're going to start having conversations about, do we need DISA at all? I mean, seriously. If you're not in the transport business anymore, if you go back to no more teleports, okay, well, what have you done for me lately? And as an end user, as a guy at the pointy end, like as a commander at the pointy end spear, like, well, if I don't need DISA for transport, I don't need DISA for the cloud, then what do we need DISA for? Because it's a 3-star level command. So yeah, I'm not saying I want it to go away. I'm just saying, like, if DISA doesn't maintain tight control over their value proposition, they're going to start asking that question. Well, and I don't know. We could use DISA for like multi-tenancy if the Marine Corps could lose that argument, but do we really want to do that? Is the question. Yeah. No, I won't. I think that we'll have to see what happens. It's just we're in a unique time right now where DIS is trying to transform, and that's a good thing. I think the jury's still out about whether it's going to work or not. And it will also depend on how aggressively the services fight against your change. Because the services are going to try to say, we can just do this ourselves, we don't need their help anymore. It's just one more person in the request chain, now I've got to have to do this. And I can tell you, after 26 years of doing this, that's always been challenging. Like, I remember being on the phone as a young lieutenant in Iraq on an Iridium, on the phone pointing controllers at a teleport site and like wanting to just smash the phone into like 500 pieces, you know, because there's just too many people involved in the troubleshooting. I'm like, I gotta call. So let me get this straight. I gotta call somebody in Italy to fix my problem, you know. And so it's just it's like anything else. The more people that are involved, the more coordination that has to happen. And so that's my only point about that is the services, if this is not involved, there's some simplicity that you can expect the services to fight for. And I know that argument's happening right now between the department and the CIO and the district commander. And I don't know what the end result's going to be. We're doing a pilot right now. I don't know if you knew about that. We're doing a pilot right now in aisle 6 in the Marine Corps on the XNS. It was a business use case. They decided to do O365 as a use case, which I don't care about. I'm in a tactical unit on command. I would rather they pick a warfighting use case, but that's the Marine Corps trying to prove that they should be allowed to have a single tenant, or a multi-tenant team. They should be allowed to have a green tenant. And the Marine Corps is continuing to fight that. So I don't know if the Navy or the Air Force are being difficult at it. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Thank you for what you do. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, sir. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, you bet.
So I know you've been confused, so I just wanted to see this and hopefully make some progress with TJ. But if all goes well, this bottom left corner picture here is the country of Japan. Countrywide emergency management system. We are the backbone doing all the sensor creation makes sense in practice for that country's emergency management system. NTT data is the comm layer for the country. They software layer on top of it.
Okay.
So I'm very eager that I will be a contributor to your prototyping exercise that I just heard about.
Yeah.
And I've got calls, but the only problem is I only have this little project up here in House Air Force Base, which is body-worn sensors. I don't yet have ATO. So, but I've already put my stuff through the cleaner. I'll come out and clean it. But I'm looking forward to you guys working through the right now, whatever you got to do. But I got a capability.
Thanks, man. Yeah, let TJ know. Right now, it's tough. I talk to everyone from industry. I never not take a meeting or never not take a phone call, because the one door you shut may be the person who has the answer to your dreams and prayers. It's been really hard for me the last year because I'm actually in command right now. So every day, commander things like tend to consume my time. But I would also say that since I was the originator of this idea, people have started to figure out who I am. And I'm not in the best position to help guys like you, but some of those people are in this room. Luis Velasquez is the Chief Technology Officer at MARFORPAC. He's a good person to talk to. Obviously, he was, he's right there with the black shirt. Yeah. And then obviously TJ. I mean, MCTSSA is the test actor in MARFORPAC. His boss, Colonel Craig Clarkson, they all work for the CG and MARFORPAC. They're in Camp Pendleton, where my headquarters is in Armatus, San Diego. He's in San Diego too. Their headquarters for MARFORPAC is in Quinter, Virginia. Yeah, so that's where to start. But the reason this is frustrating is what I called it reverse requirements development. A lot of this technology is already pretty mature, and especially in civilian world, we're using it every day. Like my email's not on my phone; it's in the cloud. And so, in the process of me trying to educate senior leaders, I was describing myself earlier. If that wasn't painfully obvious to you, being able to describe, I can describe very complicated things to people that don't understand, that wouldn't otherwise understand it. And it's kind of funny, it went full circle. I took my paper to General Matos. He told me to go out to the fleet and try to see if I could make some progress. That's where I was going with that story. Ran out of time. It seems like trucking. And I did that, knowing I wasn't going to be very successful, because you can't make a lot of progress with O&M dollars. I wrote the paper for him at the Marine Corps. So anyway, ironically enough, I was at Microsoft headquarters in Roslyn, Virginia, dressed like this. Lieutenant General Blavey, who just retired as the Commandant for Information, couldn't pick me out of a line, so he didn't know who I was. I got a phone call from his aide who said, General Blavey wants to talk to you right now. He read your paper, he needs to talk to you. He doesn't care. Chinese menu options. Telephone call, VTC, you can come in person. I was like, well, I'm 2 miles from the Pentagon. I can come right now if you put a visit request in. And I was in his office for 3 straight hours explaining my ideas and everything else. And so he's like, I'll take that. He's like, you wrote this right quickly? He's like, I'll be your advocate. And so I hosted a summit at MCTSSA last September with it was me and General Blake, and that was kind of the battle handover. And after that, they designated TJ as the chief engineer for Project Dynamis. They put SES Murray in charge of it at DC.
So we've got
Probably have that
this one.
That one I probably would have. That's the one that kind of gives everybody an overview of MCTSSA. But we can bring that up, and the second slide there really talks about our process.
Yeah.
So click on that one real quick, just so I can show you. Right, experimentation to fight tonight. Right, it's all the things that we're working on.
Okay.
And that might help people. I think that'll give some people.
So I'd like to start with you because it's structured.
Yeah.
And then
And so anyway,
I'd love to lock them into topics somehow, right? Like,
So what top? So
I mean, he's going to be in the Q&A with the others.
yeah. So
After that.
So it's us. So what's our time hack?
Potential power. So that's where it came from. It's like there's a lot of potential. I'm telling you right now, I believe this in my heart. I'm very passionate about it. So I say this, tongue in cheek, but if I could get all the technology, even if it was one each, and I put this equipment straight together, I would be able to drop the mic and stop talking. Because it would be so powerful to our general officers if they saw what I'm talking about and they can touch it.
What we can do is let you do some structure, then we give him the pen system, and then we say questions for TJ now.
Because I can eat up a good 10 minutes on this to help construct, like, hey, working with MCTSSA, this is what MCTSSA is, what it does, things like that, so that we can, hey, as we're looking at questions, everybody, think about it through, what are you doing, experimentation, cyber, transport, emergency capabilities.
Yeah, that'd be great. Good to meet you.
That's kind of what we're looking at, and that's how we're solving. That's how we're solving these problems. Okay. So that'll give us a structure.
One of the companies I've spent a lot of time talking to. Yeah.
I'll be able to hang for a little bit.
Right?
I'm here. Today is the day.
Are you in a Boston?
Sure.
No. East Coast?
All right, so we'll do 10 or 15 minutes of this, which I'm going to kick us off right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We'll have him
Who's the guy?
take
The
15
guy
minutes.
whose face I
Then
can see on
I'll
the screen.
stop him for some questions for you. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then before we lead into...
Okay. So let's see. Let's put the other slide up first, and just that way,
I went to college in Carolina.
kind of gives everybody kind of, it gives them something to peer on.
Okay. All right, please take your seats. Please take your seats.
All right. Good to see you. It's very nice to meet you.
Test.
I'll stick around. We can talk when we're done.
All right, so thanks everyone for sticking with us. Appreciate it. We know it's the last day of the event. As Bob mentioned, cordoning off this time so you could have this deliberate discussion, a more informed discussion that you're equipped, to go off and do your homework, right? Not just by yourself, but also with your government customers, right? Informed, collaborative teams that you have between you and your government customers, and how together you can come back and do the crawl, walk, run with Project Dynamis in MCTSSA. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to TJ. In this session, we have about 45 minutes. TJ is going to talk more about MCTSSA, how it's structured, how you can work with it. Then Colonel Quinter is going to take the floor for about 15 minutes, riff. And then we'll do a few questions for TJ as we end that segment. And then we'll have more Marines come up, join Colonel Quinter for some Q&A with you at the next session. And that'll start at, what time zone am I in? Whatever the next hour is. All right, so with that, TJ.
Hey everybody, I'm back again. So, I want to talk a little bit about MCTSSA, so people have a better understanding of kind of what MCTSSA is, what it does, kind of how we're organized. It'll be helpful for you all to understand that, simply because as we start talking about this experimentation, as we start talking about this prototyping, this type of activity, it will most likely vector through MCTSSA, And I want to go a little bit lower because when we think about MCTSSA, people think about this one big bubble when we're actually much more diverse than that. So again, I kind of read it just to read it, right? MCTSSA provides 24/7 global support, technical support for C5I systems, conduct engineering, testing, and evaluation, support experimentation for C5I systems, and amphibious platforms in order to inform acquisition decisions and make the FMF more capable. That's our mission. So again, we're not the acquisition project offices, but any C5I system that a Marine uses absolutely comes through MCTSSA, right? And that information, and we are going to be the evaluators of that capability. We are separated into 4 divisions. Warfighter Support Division, like I kind of said earlier, that is our premier capability, and that is how we make Marines more capable. That's a 24/7 capability. Our cadre of civilians and Marines will forward deploy. If we can't answer it Tier 1 at the phone, if we can't answer the phone, we escalate it to our Tier 2 folks. If they can't do it, we get to our engineers. And if it can't happen within that, then we'll forward deploy some team, and we can do that in less than 72 hours. So that's the capability that we have at MCTSSA. So there's not a Marine in the field that has not leveraged MCTSSA or been enabled by MCTSSA in the last 20 years. That's just a fact. So our next division is our Test and Engineering Division. They performed an engineering work. That is our division that's that's one of our divisions that's most likely associated with the project offices. So again, all of this works together. So Warfighting Support Division, right, they triage. They get the folks out there, they make sure the Marines are up and running and operational, and we ensure that those Marines are able to meet mission. Meeting mission doesn't necessarily mean that we followed the process exactly the right way, the way the program office would have liked it to work, but as long as the Marine likes it to work, then I think we're okay. But we take that feedback from that touch point with the Marines, and then we bring that back through our Test and Engineering Division. We provide that back to the project offices. Generally, that works in project and product improvement. Right. So again, I think anyone that's worn the uniform or anybody's worked with it, that's always a ebb and flow of what you get. But we leverage the data points from the Marines to be able to make those arguments of it's not a good idea because TJ thinks it's a good idea. It's a good idea because we have 77 data points from these units over the last 36 months that say that this trend is no longer sustainable. Right, so that's how we kind of do that work. Our other engineering tech activity is our amphibious vehicle test branch. Again, right, plan, execute, report, development, testing in order to characterize the performance of expeditionary combat vehicle systems and equipment in support of informed acquisition decisions. Typically that's with our amphibious vehicles, right? As we look at force design informs us that our amphibious platforms are probably not as survivable as we would like them to be in the first island chain, and we're also starting to look more at our autonomous capabilities. So we're seeing a lot more autonomous work that is now starting to show up in amphibious vehicle test branch. Because of our unique location and placement location, we have one of the we're masters of the surf zone. So we understand the characteristics of operating in and out of the surf zone. And again, that is the Marine Corps', that is their calling card. And because of that, AVTB can be considered a strategic asset within the department, right? So not only are we doing this for Marine capabilities, we have Navy. We have a lot of the Navy capabilities that come into unmanned capabilities. USV-3, for example, they come out and they test their unmanned systems here at MCTSSA. We also support unmanned capabilities with our mission partners as well, because we have mission partners that don't have very good navies and they don't have very good marine capabilities, so they don't know how to move capabilities in and out of that surf zone. There's an example where we were working with a mission partner. They were unable to get their capabilities out of the surf zone, and they had to go figure out how to find autonomous capabilities that were left floating around for about more hours than were required, and how to get it out. But again, because they didn't know how to do that. It's not because they weren't capable, they didn't know how to do that testing, and they're not optimized to do that. So we were able to look at that data, we were able to help them out, and then that mission partner was able to now they're able to actually employ their capabilities. So that is another capability we have there. And then we have our infrastructure and support division. That division it performs 2 roles. It's like our S6 or our communications section, right? So they maintain base infrastructure, common infrastructure for us, but they also have another role in which they work with the MCTSSA, they work with our enterprise and help to characterize performance on the enterprise and then push that information out back to the enterprise to help them out. So as you can see there, we have a ton of MOAs that we have with not just with NAVWAR, DARPA, NAVC, McWill, with the FMF. And that allows us to, because we have those memorandums of agreement, that allows us to do the experimentation that we're able to do through that agreement process. And at the bottom, those priorities are pretty simple. Force Design 2030, program offices, and the warfighter. I would say it's probably in reverse order, but it all ebbs and flows. All of those things are informing in how we do stuff. So I'll go to the next slide here. As you think about working with MCTSSA and leveraging that, this is kind of our thought process, is how we think through the problem. It starts out with that experimentation support. Right now, again, verifying kill chain, kill web capabilities, and informing the Marine Corps' approach to EABs. So again, I'm not going to read through all of that, but again, that cyber SIGMAN capability, so if you have capabilities in that cyberspace, and it's cyber and SIGMAN, right, again, own force signature management, right, and understanding what we look like in the spectrum, that's going to be important, right? We need to know how we're radiating, and then we also need to know how to consume information from not just from our traditional from traditional, from our RAD battalions, but again, working with our mission partners. We have, if you're in the first island chain, if you're in the Philippines, you're probably going to spend more time talking to the Filipino Coast Guard, and you're going to talk to some of our other stuff. Being able to consume that partner data, that sensor data, right, and be able to consume that sensor data, that partner data before you get there, is pretty important, right, because that tells me what I need to do. So understanding how to exploit the RF spectrum is critically important. So helping us to be able to do that quickly and then bringing it into smaller form factors so that the Marines can employ it. If I can have a handheld device that allows me to be able to make sense of the spectrum and let me know what I can see and more importantly, what can see me, that's pretty helpful. Transport, again, we're tyranny of distance. So we talk about that a little bit. So that tyranny of distance is something we're going to work about. That's going to mean we're going to have transport. We're going to have transport that we have to deal with. Understanding how we can improve, we can maximize the network, the finite network that we're going to have, because even in competition, I don't even want to talk about conflict, but even in competition, the service is competing with itself, it's competing with the department, because it's a finite bandwidth in there, and how are we the most efficient? Helping us understand how to be as efficient as we can be, that's critical. Emerging capabilities, this is where the good idea fairy comes from. I don't know what I don't know, right? So if it's not on this list, that's what we want to find out. What's on the horizon that we don't know about, that we should know about? That's what we want to be able to do, right? How do we improve our Marine Corps enterprise network? How do we integrate things like Colonel Quinter was saying, 5G, right? How do we do that experimentation in support of those EABs? What does an EAB need to look like from a communication perspective? What does it mean to persist as an EAB? When we're talking about, in my mind, EABs as small as 10 to 15 Marines that are in that space, how do they maintain comm? How are they able to sense and make sense, and how are they able to move into that space freely? Littoral engineering, naval integration. Again, the other part about this is that some of our stuff is going to be firm fixed. A lot of our stuff is going to be afloat, right? So how do we think about all the cool things that you all can do? How can I do that when I'm afloat? How can I do that? How can I integrate with naval networks? Anyone that's ever been part of a MU, anyone that's ever had to work with the Navy to get their comm up, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge because you're no longer the master of your own domain. It's barely a negotiation, right? So understanding all of the cool technology that we are building for the Marine Corps, it has to be inherently naval. The Navy needs to understand what we're bringing on that ship, or else they're going to resist integrating that into the ship. And it just makes it harder for everybody. It's frustrating for the sailors, it's frustrating for the Marines, and at the end of the day, while we're going back and forth doing this, right, our adversaries moving into space because they don't have comm. So how do we integrate into that naval architecture? That's what we want to do that. Systems interoperability, again, as we're bringing in, again, I keep looking over here at Lieutenant Colonel Logan, because he had the tyranny of experimentation at his doorstep. We talk about systems interoperability. All ideas are decent ideas, but they're not great ideas at the same time. So we need to understand how we're moving information in and out, how we're bringing these different systems into the ecosystem in a way that, that minimizes toil. And that is a term that I use all the time, right? Marines are designed to embrace the suck. They're designed to work in austere environments. They're designed to work in hard environments and do hard work, right? They are not designed to have to do extra work and toil to get the basics working, right? That is a responsibility that falls back on us to reduce the toil. That is the supporting establishment, and that's industry. So when we look at bringing in something in, it has to be complementary to how they already are organized, manned, trained, and equipped. If I diverge from that, and I have to add extra training that we weren't prepared for, if I have to organize in a way that we weren't prepared for, that's a harder thing. That becomes toil. And that means I get really, really smart kids that learn a lot of smart stuff, and they get burnt out really quick, and then they leave, right? Again, at the end of the day, what the Marine Corps is very good at is retaining top talent. It's hard to do, but it's harder to do if we make it harder for them to do their jobs. Reducing that toil ensures that I maintain a top quality group of dedicated, loyal, public military servants that are ready to do the job for the time that we need them to do it, right? Every time I lose a Marine because they're no longer inspired to do the work, because it's too hard to do the work, we're making it harder for them, that's a loss to the nation. So again, allied coalition interoperability, the one thing that, especially if you're in this AOR, you're gonna have to be allied and you have to do coalition as point of course, right? The hardest part about doing that in the Marine Corps is we are not organized and we're not resourced and we're not funded to do that in a sustainable way. That is not a technology problem, that is a policy problem that we need to work through. But as we are doing that work, what MCTSSA does a lot of is ensuring that those technical requirements, another one, here's a code word for you guys, again, if you're taking notes, Federated Mission FMN standards. Look up DOD 8110.01. That is the DOD instruction for mission partner interoperability. That drives how the department will get after interoperability. And that drive is based on applying to Federated Mission Network standards. And that's how we're going to get there. So what we do at MCTSSA when we evaluate your systems, and if we're evaluating systems, we evaluate them against Federated Mission Network standards. So even though there's not a hard, we'll talk about terms in a little bit, but even though a system doesn't have a specification for Federated Mission Network standards, we will evaluate it against Federated Mission Network standards, say, hey, if I put this into an environment with mission partners, it will have these characteristics. Right, and we will make recommendations to the service to say, hey, our program of record can't organically talk to the Filipinos, for example. We'll say, okay, well here, they're going to come out, okay, cool, what are you going to give me, right? You told me to show up here, but you didn't give me anything to communicate with my partners. And we will look at, hey, here are the things that would support those types of capabilities. We offer that up to the units. They work with it. TAC is probably the prime example of that, Tactical Assault Kit. That allowed the Marines to be able to have communication with the Filipinos in a method that both the Filipinos could understand and the Marines could understand, right? Reducing the toil, allowing them to be able to persist inside the First Island chain. And then ultimately, all of this comes to a fight tonight scenario, right? The Marines, in everything that we understand, that if the balloon goes up, there'll be limited indications and warnings. We have to be properly positioned, and again, like I said before, if deterrence fails, we need to be prepared to punish with speed and violence. And that's fight tonight, and we hear it from all of our senior leaders. It is not fight tomorrow, it's not fight next week, it is fight tonight. And our Marines are properly postured to be able to do that. And again, at the bottom tagline here, again, I think we talked through that a little bit earlier. Again, as you all are looking at where to go inside the Marine Corps, again, MARCOR SysCom, as you talk about Luis over there, make sure you're talking to MARCOR SysCom. That's the front door every time. That's the best door. Everything else is going to be a little bit harder, not impossible, but it's a little bit harder. Making sure that he's part of that conversation makes it easier for you. Working with McWill through that experimentation space, that's another way to get through. And then working with MCTSSA, we typically are going to route those we're going to route your proposals through either MARCOR SysCom or through McWill and figure out which one of those are going to be best suited is this something that we want to do from an experimentation perspective, or is this something that we want to procure for a longer term sustained engagement? So that is kind of, so that's a little bit, I think it's a pretty good overview of MCTSSA there. Hopefully that was helpful for people. You hear MCTSSA, you hear it all the time, does a thing. This is kind of how we work and how we're organized, and happy to entertain any questions about MCTSSA and some of the work we're doing.
So I'm going to ask the first question, but prepare your questions. We'll do, you know, at least 15 minutes of questions for TJ here. So, I mean, we all know the importance of agile operations, right, on the battlefield. You know, I dedicated my professional life to agile research and development, top of funnel of new capabilities coming in and showing the Marine Corps was open for business. In the middle is acquisitions, and acquisitions is anything but agile, right? But I am encouraged by the agile practices that you're promoting now, and you know, MCTSSA is really leaning into that, and MCTSSA sits right there in that center, right? And so can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of being so agile now? Absolutely. So again, if anyone that understands the acquisition process, it's waterfall in nature, right? And as much as we try to get to, as much as the program offices are moving towards agile methodologies, they're still going to be beholden to those setter processes, those engineering processes that are part of standard acquisition. Because again, we're looking at this from a prototype perspective, MCTSSA has, and our work with McWill has given us an opportunity to look at acquisition or look at development in a different way. So we are leveraging, you know, agile methodologies internal to our formation to get after this work. So we again, you go through the agile process, but we look at a plan, build, assess, deploy, and measure. That's kind of what we look at throughout that agile methodology. So right, we're going to plan. That's working with feedback from the FMF, research that we've already done, reports we've done. So we do that from a planning perspective. Then we're going to build a thing. Then we're going to deploy it. And then we're going to assess it, right? We're able to do that roughly, depending on the type of capability. We're typically able to get from that within 2 to 3 months, from a plan to have something capability to get out there. It's not as beautiful as it is in industry where you would do an agile process, and at the end of the sprint, you've got something to demo because our customer base may or may not be available to be able to do that stuff like you'd like for them to be. So we typically have that demonstration process associated with those major exercises. But we're keeping those Marines involved in the conversation, and they're always welcome to be a part of that. So as those partnerships that I think we want to try and grow through this process, the benefit that you will have, I believe, is that we are going to bring those Marines on the line as we're talking together. You're going to get that perspective from the Marines as we go through that stuff, and then we can do this as a partnership. So, and that's been very effective in what we've done through some of our through this last year of experimentation. Other questions for TJ and about MCTSSA?
Can you hear me? Anyway, so TJ, I want to use the opportunity to inform the industry partners that, you know, MCTSSA now is an STRL designation, and I don't think industry partners may know the difference between why that's significant for MCTSSA, how that helps you expedite things, and how that kind of puts you on par with warfare centers. They may not know what that means as well. So if you take the opportunity to enlighten, I think they would benefit from that.
So we have been I'll say two things. In 2020, we were designated a technical activity. So that allowed us to enter into CRADAs independently. That allows us to do that research. And then as a Science, Technology, and Reinvention Lab, STRL, that provides us additional authorities. Some of that is internal ability for us to be able to retain some talent. That allows us to do some of our own contracting actions. But ultimately, that gives us capabilities similar to the warfare centers, like the NIWICs, the Carter Rocks, AFRL. So essentially, and we're in the process of actually going through a name change where we'll be the Marine Corps Research Lab, RIL or something like that. I think that's what it's talking about. But that, but that's where we're at now, and we're looking at that ability for us to be able to do that research. Again, think of us as similar to an AFRL or an Army Research Lab. We'll have the same capabilities to be able to do that work and the same authorities. And that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful authority. that we'll be able to implement. That allows us to do a lot. That allows us to get access to additional funding sources, a lot of the R&D funding sources that, as a pure T&E activity that we were before, we weren't able to get access to. So because again, it's not about the money, it's all about the money, right? But because of that, because we have that resourcing, it allows us to get after and do some prototyping a lot better. And then as long as it informs not just the FMF, but informs our acquisition community, right, and helps them to start moving. Again, if we're doing it right, we're going to start seeing capabilities show up before the PALM cycle that it was scheduled for, because we're able to do mid-year reprogramming. So, did I get there? All right, checks in the mail. So, any other questions? Go ahead.
Under that STRL designation, are you able to leverage CRADAs that are signed with other research labs? So like if we got an AFRL CRADA, are you able to leverage that, or do we have to go through the whole process of registration?
So there's a couple. That's a great question. So there's a couple ways to do that. You could go through the whole CRADA process, but that's slow. We have the ability to work with a principal investigator, and there's a concept within CRADAs called a trusted agent, right? So that principal investigator can designate someone as an individual as a trusted agent, and then they'll be responsible for the execution of those responsibilities for whatever side you're on. If you're on the I'll speak on the government side. On the government side, I can designate another government entity, a trusted agent, for that particular window of experimentation or whatever we want to do with that CRADA, right? And as long as it aligns with those CRADA objectives, which typically they can, we can do that. So there is the process of doing a CRADA, a joint CRADA, or those are longer. They're valuable, but they're longer. And in our particular paradigm that we're in right now, we're prioritizing speed over process in that particular space. But depending on the scope of the CRADA, it would designate what we're going to do. I think if a new CRADA was starting up, I think one of the lessons learned, I would say, is if I'm looking at new CRADA starting up, I'd probably start polling the joint force to say, hey, we're about to do this thing. Do you guys want to jump on this thing before we sign it off? The first set of CRADAs that at least I was a part of was much more self-centered, and it was much more focused on expanding MAGTAF C2 MVP, the stuff we were working. So we went very down and in. But I think to be a good steward, I'd do another one. I'd do it much wider. I'd cast a wider net. I think that's how I'd do it. So.
Let me just add to that. I mean, some of the benefits, if you were to add a Marine Corps trusted agent to your Air Force CRADA, right, you're allowing that principal investigator at the Air Force to now have joint with him. Mm-hmm. That's really beneficial for him, right, as he goes after funding, as you go after funding on his behalf as well. Yep. But you also aren't incurring the bureaucratic tax of the delays of the CRADA, right? Yep. And now you're having two lines of communication. You allow the Marine Corps to get caught up into the momentum and the maturity of the operational, capability that's already being discussed, right? Yep. And so how that technology might be fought, and that's really beneficial. So always think joint in that. Always think you're overcoming the bureaucratic barriers, and the agility from MCTSSA to come alongside you. Yep. I think is important. Yep. And again, I'm a huge fan of CRADAs. Simply because, at least the way we've structured the CRADAs at MCTSSA, I'm a huge fan of that because, and this is helpful for our industry as well, is that when we think about CRADAs as cooperative. And the hardest thing that we've had, the biggest challenge we've had with the CRADA, the one that I'm working with Ultra, is that they're used to engaging the government from a client vendor perspective. It's like, well, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to, what's your time? It's like, well, no. What do you want to do? No, whatever you want to do. That's what I want to do. Yeah. Right. And it's like, no, what do you need to solve? Right. What is the problems that you need to solve? And so over the course of the last year, establishing that, understanding the relationship in the CRADA that, hey, you have some needs. Like now we have a conversation like, hey, we've got some defects in our backlog. Can we just jump in your environment and test this out really quickly? Yes, of course you can, right? Would you guys put some government folks together and then help do an assessment of that? Yes, of course. So those are the types of things, if you get into a CRADA, be prepared to ask for what you want, right? Do not leave it to the government to do all the stuff.
Number one, they're probably overtaxed in their own day-to-day business anyway. And generally, just, we're a couple of things. We're cheap, so we're not gonna spend a lot of money on this muffler, one. Two, I'm lazy. I'm not gonna write a whole bunch for you, you know what I mean? So so you got a bad partner at the beginning. So the more that you can bring things up, and the more I'm like, oh, that's written correctly. That's a great idea. And I put my name on it. It's like, look at the idea I did, right? And then so that I think is helpful for you all to be, as you get into those things, be aggressive about the things you want to get. And it becomes, if you have a good principal investigator, it becomes a collaboration anyway, and they want to work with you to try and see those goals set, right? It shouldn't be a challenge. I'll pause on that for a second, and then I'll come up with another thought. The other thing too is, don't also think you have to do an event every single week, right? If you get a crate and say, hey, we may want to do something once a year. Okay, that's fine, right? Is it once a quarter? Is it once a year? Again, it's going to be beholden to whatever your IRAD funding is. So be cognizant of your own IRAD funding, and then what we'll do is say, hey, here are the couple of events that we have coming up that's part of our service level experimentation campaign plan. Here's the things, these are the things that from our technological perspective, we think it might be interest to the Marine Corps. What are things that might be interested to you, right? And then you all, again, we bring you in the room, we talk about some of those things, and then we go from there, so.
If I can just highlight, similarly, if you have contracts, and I'll use NIWC Pacific for an example. You may have a contract with NIWC Pacific. If you aren't from San Diego, you might not know the strong relationship between MCTSSA and NIWC Pacific, right? Your contract inherently has a little bit of flexibility for you, right? That the learning objectives from MCTSSA could come alongside your government customer at NIWC Pacific, right? And they can share information. And that's how, right, you are learning more about the adjacent customer, so you're inherently developing a more joint capability, or you're addressing more enabling capabilities alongside your core competency that you're on the contract for. So let's be flexible there. Let's coach your contract owner, right, your principal investigator at NIWC Pacific, and we'll want that highlighted in the RFIs, that you have those types of contracts, that you see inherently there's an opportunity to do it that way. Yep.
The other thing that I like about CRADAs as well, and we're going down a rabbit hole a little bit, but it's exciting. CRADAs are a great opportunity for small businesses to compete. Our larger defense partners, again, they're all partners, they compete in a different way. GDIT is going to approach a problem set much different than OWL Defense is going to approach that problem, right? And again, we want what CRADAs should be doing is helping to ultimately help to stimulate the DIB and allow people to compete at it raises the playing field for everybody. So that allows us to do that. The CRADAs also allow us to do things. For example, once you're integrated, I can put a CRADA in at, hey, this CRADA is going to be at the secret level or the TS level. Any problems that we're going to solve that you saw in the last couple slides since we've been here, it's going to be at the informed level. Right, so the challenge of acquisition is that contracts are written at the unclassified level. I'm not going to tell you where the ghosts are in the unclassified RFI, and you're probably not going to write to my solution because I know what I already know. So when we do these CRADAs, we write these CRADAs at the secret level, the TS level. Part of that's bringing you in, right, and then laying out here's the problem set and here are the timelines that are associated with that. That's what. So the CRADAs that I work. We bring those folks in, we bring in their executives, we bring them and say, here's what it looks like. And it's like, you can choose to support and help us out at this, or you can watch it on TV. Either way, the timeline's the timeline, right? And I think that motivates people in a lot of different ways when they kind of see that, but also they are also a lot more responsive in getting capabilities out there because they know that it actually has, it could have a deterrent effect. So that's another part of that as well. Again, big companies can afford to hold those clearances, right? CRADAs allow us to get those clearances in for small businesses, and that again, access is part of the value stream, right? So again, you may not get that. You may not get an RFQ out of that, an RFP, but if you could hold on to a clearance for a year or two through a CRADA, how much is that worth to you? What's the value? What's the value in that? If you get a blue team assessment every 6 months at the government cost, how much is that worth to you? that you can now take that blue team assessment from a government agency and then attach it to all of your other RFPs that you respond to. That, hey, this capability has been assessed by a government agency. How much is that worth to you? So that's what that's the benefit of working in those creative capabilities. So anyway, we're good? We're good? We're wrapping on that? Anyone? Last one? Anyone? Here all day. Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned small business that may be coming a research lab. Many research labs have civic programs, so would you expect to have a civic program?
I think that's in our roadmap. I don't want to go too far past our technical director on where we are on that, but ultimately that's what we want to be able to do. Again, and again, this is where I am. I think stimulating the div, stimulating small business, that is the way forward. Innovate, like Colonel Quinter was saying, our competitive advantage is the ability to innovate, and to be able to innovate, I've got to fund those small companies with the best ideas, because every big company was a small company. So anyway, that's what I got.
All right, thank you, TJ. So we're going to transition here to Q&A. We're going to transition to Q&A. Colonel Quinter is going to open with about 10 minutes of remarks. I'm going to invite the Marines up to come and sit that are up here for the Q&A part. And so I'll give you the 10-minute signal on your remarks, and then we'll open the floor for your questions, and then we'll bounce around with the answers at that point.
All right. I'll stand up this part, I guess. All right, no slides, so. Yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, leave that one up, that's good. I'll use that one. Probably some good stuff on there. So, I talked to a few people on the break. A couple people wanted to introduce themselves. I will say this, this has been said twice, but from me to you, thanks for taking the time to be here. I was telling a couple industry partners at the last break that I never turn down the phone calls or the emails I get from industry, because you just never know. You may shut the door on yourself accidentally, and I think that's just really irresponsible. So we have a lot of smart people out in industry trying to help us solve some intractable problems, and I think it's kind of my responsibility at my rank and in my position to listen to you all, so we can kind of go back and forth, and that's part of that open and honest communication about what we do and don't need. So this is the slide that was produced by DCI after they took this back from me. So I stopped short because Brandon was giving me the nudge when I was my long-winded answer to somebody's question, but I did mention to you that I wrote this paper from my cubicle in the Pentagon when I was in the Joint Staff J6, and then eventually was encouraged by Major General Matos when he was the director to go out to the FMF and see how much progress I could make. That was obviously a bit, he wasn't asking me, he was just like encouraging me. He's, advocacy, I wouldn't say advocacy was dead, but a lot of people, Marines were saying, well, the Commandant killed advocacy. But he wasn't in a position really to help me at that particular time. This was back 3 years ago. So I did what he recommended that I do, and I took the paper right out of his hands, and I walked out of the office, and I go, I'm on a one-man fighting position now. This is Jason Quinter doing this on his own. So I went back. I hadn't been selected for command yet. I was the G6 for 3rd Mall. So a lot of my friends in my community asked me, like, why did you want to go to the mall? Like, you got a division background, and ironically, I'm an 06 commander in the mall, and I've never been in the mall. So I've never served in the wing. I actually grew up in the wing. My dad was a Cobra pilot for 30 years. So here I am, MAGCO, never even been in a MAG before. My reason for wanting to go to the wing was that Marine Aviation has the highest density of sensing capability in the MAGTAF. So don't overthink it. Like, that was the only reason. MQ-9s, TPS-80s, F-35s. We have more F-35s on the flight line than any wing in the world. We're almost completely transitioned from Super Hornet, or from Hornet and Harrier to F-35 and 3rd Mall. Yuma, MAG-13 is 100% transitioned to F-35, and MAG-11 is almost done. Those are our 2 fixed-wing MAGs. So you could do a lot with CJADC2 when you have a powerful sensing capability. So that was my reason for wanting to go to the wing, although my peers thought I was crazy. Ask Lieutenant Colonel Logan, if you ask him if he wanted to go be the wing G6, that's probably not high on his list. So we'll see, maybe he'll end up there anyway. But anyway, so I wrote this paper. The 4 actual original lines of operation in order are, number 1, modernize the network. So That's federate systems. The goal of CJADC2 is, there's a lot of goals to it, but the main goal is to federate systems. When you say stuff like, we want every sensor to talk to every shooter, that sounds pretty pie in the sky, but that's the goal of JADC2, is sensor to shooter integration. When you have programs of record that are made by a lot of different companies, there's no obligation for those companies to make sure they're interoperable. And you look at the biggest cardinal sin in the history of DoD, what is it? It's the fact that Lockheed Martin makes F-35 and F-22 and they don't even talk to each other. It's the same company that made 2 different jets, and the 2 different jets are not even interoperable. That cost extra. That's like supersize. You got to pay like a couple extra bucks, right? So I was talking to AT&T downstairs before I came in here. Good friend of mine, George Malcasian. And I have an MBA on the side in terms of my education. Most of my education was military provided, but my undergrad's in engineering, and I have an MBA from Pepperdine. And I understand fiduciary responsibility and what shareholders expect. Big dividends, large profits. CEO fails in either one or both of those, they're getting fired. I don't care if it's a small company or a big company. So you're not incentivized in industry to make equipment that's interoperable. You're just not. It costs extra. And the Marine Corps, we're the little service. We don't have a lot of extra money. So that's a challenge for us. So what do? We guard. It's law of the jungle again. Possession is 9/10 of the law. You guard existing programs, and we're apprehensive and cautious bringing new tech on board if it's at the expense of an existing program that we're palming for and budgeting for. Does that make sense? So federating systems is the hardest part. In the Marine Corps, that's called the Network Modernization Plan. We refer to it now as NetMod 2030, I think, is what we're calling it. That is the Marine Corps-wide plan, fully funded by the MROC across the FIDIP. We're in execution year number 4, I think. It's about a $10 billion plan to modernize the Marine Corps enterprise network, both NIPR and SIPR. JWICS is SCI comms. That's a separate issue. So that's a lot of money. That's mostly upgrades to base, post, and station, fiber infrastructure, building 5G out on bases and posts and stations, which will revolutionize the network. So that's LU 1. LU 2 is aggregate data. You'll know that we're winning inside the Department of Defense when it comes to CJADC2 when we get closer to achieving data centricity. And so I love saying this. The Marine Corps is a software company that still thinks it's a hardware company. So data is the 5.56 round of the future battlefield. If our senior leaders don't believe that, we will never achieve JADC2. You're going to close the kill chain on live SIPRNet or JWICS. That's the truth. If you don't believe that, then we don't need a JADC2 strategy. If you think bullets are more important than data, then China's got you right where they want you. It's about data centricity. I loathe, if I hear a commo say this, I correct them, because that's my MOS. I loathe the term information exchange requirements. That is the last war. It's about data. Is the data in the right place? Is it aggregated in the right place, in the cloud? Is it at the edge of the network? Is it in the data center? I don't care what the information requirement is. I want the data. I want raw data. I want telemetry. Why? Because that's the data I'm going to win the war with. It's the currency of the future. Data is the 5.56 round of the future, the NATO ball round. Why? Because that's the data that's going to drive AI. That's the data that's going to drive machine learning, large language models, data centricity, big data analytics. So that data is the commodity. That's what you need to protect. That's why Zero Trust Architecture. That's why ICAM. That data, as soon as we can make our networks, we become a data-centric organization and not a network-centric organization, we'll be better off for it. You can't protect networks. I'll tell you a story. When I was in high school, I used to drive my dad's MG. Anybody remember MGs? Softback. Thing was awesome. British Racing Green. The thing was like mint condition, 1979 MG. Typical, like, Cobra pilot car, right? My dad told me one time, like, hey, don't lock the car when you're at school, like when they park it in the parking lot at school. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'd rather they just cut the canvas. The canvas is cheaper than the car. If they're going to steal it, they're going to steal it. That's a network-centric mindset. You can't, if you think you could actually protect the network, you are fooling yourself. That is nothing but a jobs program. It's like TSA at the airport. Do you feel safe when you go through the TSA checkpoint? I mean, some days maybe, some days maybe not. So I think network security is a jobs program in this country. We doom and gloom sells in the Pentagon. Oh my God, they're going to break in the network. If you actually cared about securing the data, you'd go about it differently. And it got so ridiculous that we have an executive order from the President of the United States to be on zero trust architecture across the federal government by 2027, signed by President Biden. Because we just apparently don't get it, right? So I think it's important. So data centricity, data is the commodity that we're trying to protect. So a data-centric network is what we need, right? So that's LU 2. LU 3 is transition to cloud. Cloud is the critical requirement for CJADC2. It's the most important part of JADC2. No cloud, no ZTA, no post-quantum cryptography, no ICAM solutions, no DevSecOps, no platform as a service, no software as a service, no infrastructure as a service, no AI, no machine learning, no large language models, no data analytics. You get my point? If we do nothing in the next year but execute the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability Contract, we'll be better and more lethal for it. So cloud is absolutely critical. So I don't care if we call it MCTSSA or we could call it whatever we want. We call it purple dinosaur for all I care. At the end of the day, we need the network that we are using to be cloud enabled. And LU 4 is increased C4 cyber literacy. And so I was joking around with one of the industry partners that came up and talked to me. If you didn't gather this when I made a comment at the first thing I said when I started speaking earlier, I was talking about myself. And to make it to your rank in the Marine Corps as a commo, I will presume that you're good at explaining difficult things to people that don't understand comm, because that's what it takes to survive as a commo in the Marine Corps. It's usually someone else's problem. I talk about that in the paper that I wrote. If we keep treating comm like it's someone else's problem, we will die on the battlefield because of it. It's everyone's problem. Command and control is a warfighting function. And when you talk to people that aren't communicators or they're not in the cyber world, they think command and control is a line and block chart with associated authorities. And that is that's part of it. It's in MCDP 6. That's not what I think about when I think about comm. I think about systems and interoperability, hardware, software. So I think it's really, really important. We have to raise the level of all boats. Everyone needs to understand C4 cyber. To get people's attention, I use this example with General Glavy, the first 3-hour meeting I had with him in the Pentagon about Project Dynamis. When before that, I don't think he could pick me out of a lineup. He didn't even know who I was. But we were talking about it. I was in his office for 3 hours explaining everything that I'm talking to you about right now. And I was just like, sir, it's not okay that people don't understand this stuff. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And I use China as an example. Like I told you before, I'm a school-trained planner, and I'm also a school-trained strategist. I'm a graduate of the Naval War College and the National War College. And so I know quite a bit about China. That's what my master's thesis was on, and quite a bit about India. That was my second master's thesis. And China has a lot of inherent advantages. We could not like their political system and the fact that they're communist all we want. It's a political system, okay? Every country has their own way of going about things. They have inherent advantages to the fact that you don't know who you're talking to half the time. Are you talking to Xi Jinping as the head of the military commission? Are you talking to Xi Jinping as the president of China? Are you talking to him as the head of the PLA? Like, which is it? It's yes, all of the above. China is not very good at inventing anything. They were 2,000 years ago, not so much now, because their political system does not breed innovation. Innovation gets squashed unless it was innovated by the government or the Communist Party, right? So what does that mean? They are the world beater at early adoption of technology. They steal it and then they use it for their own devices. That is what we're up against. And so if we think we're going to win the next war with last war's technology, we got another thing coming. We need to get into the cloud like 5 years ago. So it's a massive problem. So I'll stop there. Those are the 4 original lines of operation for Project Dynamis. And I think that's what we're getting after. Mr. Murray, when this was brought up to the service level, and he took this effort over on behalf of General Glavy, I think this was the first product he built as he started to go around. And what he was doing the first couple months was he spent a lot of time on the road, Astro did, at the 1- and 2-star level with this slide explaining what we were collectively across the Marine Corps going to try to do. And so I don't know if the dream to have like our version of Project Convergence capstone is ever going to happen, but if I were General Glenn, that's what I'd be trying to do. The next time we go to the softball field, we would be the lead sled dog, and we would be executing with our own programs of record and our own equipment, because I'm not sure that the Air Force program, or being the JFN being a program of record on the Air Force side, which is the biggest thing we got going in CJAT C2 land, as I call it right now, is going to necessarily be beneficial for the Marine Corps, unless we could convince the Air Force to do everything we want them to do. Like I said, 4 stars do what they want.
All right, so we're going to open it up for questions. Bob's going to set the stage, right? The importance of warfighter feedback, right? So he's going to give you a little bit of relevance around the Marines that are up and shape it from there. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just real quick. So you're only as good as your team, and I've probably got the best team that I have the honor to serve every day. And so I thought you should hear from them, or more importantly, you should be able to ask the warfighter exactly the capability question that you have and what it means to them, and get some feedback. And so just as real quick introduction, you have Lieutenant Colonel Brent Logan, came from 3rd MLR and now leads the G6 Directorate for 2/3 of the Marine Corps. To my right, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Decimores. I served with him when we were writing requirements. He knows acquisition probably better than anybody in this room, and he also is pretty damn good at warfighting. To his left, Master Gunner Sergeant, I'm sorry, drawing blank on the last name.
Oh, shit. Master Gunner Sergeant Quesada.
Quesada. So Master Guns has been here for a couple of months, and he served at every echelon throughout the MAGTAF, and we're honored to have him. And then to his left, Lieutenant Colonel Miller, LDO, runs a team of several chief warrant officers, and I rely on him for anything JFN, anything MOC, anything integration, anything MPE. His mailbox fills up pretty quick. So I just wanted to open the floor to all of you to ask questions as we've had this discussion directly to the warfighter. I think it's a great opportunity, and I'll get off the stage.
Good afternoon, Jim Rice. Thank you for your service. So data centricity was a good bit of what you were just speaking about, Colonel. With the mission partner network and information sharing, with what you're getting after with the prototyping, can somebody talk a little bit about what the warfighter need is with regard to sharing the right data with the right mission partner for the need of any examples that you can provide?
I mean, MPE is mostly just trying to fix the interoperability issues. And like I talked about before, there's a lot of that is related to policies and permissions. I would say one of my collateral duties in the J6 is I was the Joint Staff J6 LNO to EUCOM and AFRICOM, both of the combatant commands. And I will tell you that MPE has been thus far more important to NATO and all the NATO partners in Europe than it is to Indo-PACOM countries, coalition partners in Indo-PACOM. I say that because that's who shows up at the meetings. Like, and I know because the meetings happened in my space, so I usually would have to let them in the door because we were swipe access, and it was usually like Swedes back then when they were thinking about getting into NATO. This was before they were even in NATO. Brits every time, all the Five Eye partners, but the Canadians, the Brits, but a lot of European countries, the Italians, Romanians. And I rarely, if ever, saw any ROC coalition from Korea or Japanese parties. So anyway, I think that MPE is the solution, the coalition solution. And at least in 1MEF and 3MEF, I mean, we're struggling with that even today. We're still having to use things like Centrix, and that so it's really not, the network's not that hard. It's just are we allowed to give them the data or not? This used to drive me nuts when I was in MUS6 on the 13th MU, because I'm like, there's no reason why we can't. Tell me either I can give them the data or I'm not allowed to. Like, that's not my decision to make. I'm not the, just like who you could share crypto with is not up to you either. You need to have a crypto sharing agreement. So I'm not making it sound like trivializing it, but it really isn't that difficult. I mean, a network is a network. And the reason MPE, I think, has a good chance of succeeding is because we're making each country that wants to be able to use MPE, like, basically pay to play. And so when they have to do that, that means they have to have some skin in the game. They have to use their own money, and so far it's not been a problem. I don't know how much TJ talked about CWIX, but 2MEF has done probably the most work with MPE development and MARFORPAC in Germany.
Yeah, I apologize. I was thinking more along the lines of the actual data that needs to be shared as opposed to the network itself.
Like
facilitating that.
linked.
Let me pass it around. So what we'd like is some tangible, right? Information is a warfighting function now, right? So from your experience, the rest of you on the panel, like, can you give us something tangible about maybe your time at 3rd MLR, right? And why information is so critical, why the data sharing is so critical, making it a little more tangible for the audience. You want to start?
Sure. Lieutenant Colonel Brent Logan. I've just checked into MARFORPAC as the G6 director. I did do 3 years at 3rd MLR as the S6, and then actually before that I was actually at C4. I wrote the Bible that you mentioned, sir,
yeah.
The NetMod plan, so my apologies for that. But I do have a background working with CD&I and requirements, C4, and some of the things that happen in the National Capital Region. But I'm going to probably just say a couple of anecdotes in terms of experiences that I had with 3rd MLR deploying this summer to the first island chain for over 3 months, doing a number of different constructive kills with our French partners, Japanese partners, and then our Filipinos. And a lot of the times they have different levels of security on their network, so I need an ability to share with them fires information so I can pass them all of that data at the right time, at speed, so that we can actually have them take the shot instead of us. I think in the Marine Corps, we get way too involved on us taking the shot, and we need to hand that over to our partners and enable them to defend their own countries and their own sovereign territories. And so I would say that would be one example, and stripping some of the information off of the data that we have and passing them everything that they need to take the shot and maybe a little bit of the why, and that would be just enough. So that data tagging that allows us to do that and have that fine-grained control. Hopefully that's something that's instantiated on MPE. If that's something we can go towards, and I know that I saw a number of different vendors out there on the floor today and the other days that can do that, if we can do something like that, that would help solve some of those problems, getting that information shared with our partners without necessarily having to inherit some of the issues with their own networks.
You want to pass it down?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to add to that. By the way, I'm Phil Desimos. I am a Space and Propagation Engineering Officer. Like Brent, I did some time at the Beltway as well, at CD&I and Marco Syscom as a requirements guy and a project officer. I can tell you, it's some of the, if you take a look at what we are supporting, some of the assumptions across commanders, across the JTF commanders down echelon, the biggest problem is transferring target party data from sensor to shooter, right? Or that be a set of eyeballs that are Japanese eyeballs, or a system that is a Japanese system to a shooter, vice versa, right? So to agree with what he says, it is all about the target quality data.
Yeah, I mean, you roll all this into, I think the horse is dead, right? Target quality data, policies that we can't change at our level. So prior to coming up to MARFORPAC, I was at 1MEF G6 in the Expeditionary Operations section. So my portfolios cover MRF D, MRF C, and the 3 West Coast MUs, some of 31st MU, obviously, because we provide the BLT that goes on it. But one of the biggest things I think that we can hit on for your conversation in terms of data sharing is MRF D, right? So we're working with one of our 5I partners, and most of the exercises now that were bilateral in the MRF D portfolio are now truly trilateral, quadlateral. You know, they're bringing in more than just our 5I partners. So yes, we're running into the issue now of, even with our 5I partners pure, it's almost impossible to trade information, to be able to work next to each other in the same space, honestly. That is one of the biggest issues that they have at the MAGTAF headquarters there in Larakia, is you have a Australian watch floor and you have Marines sitting out on there, but they can't look at the same cop, right? So yes, it's ultimately it's policy that's eating our lunch, and we need advocacy from, you know, people that wear the uniform, but also people outside saying, hey, you know, we can provide a system, but until you change the policy, we're not going to be able to get there. We will never get to any sensor, any shooter, if we don't change that policy.
Nothing to add.
You know what I'd say too, like the use case for the most valuable use case for CJIT2 is targeting. So you talk about gaining, maintaining custody of like target quality tracks. That's my job. That's what my unit does. I own the TPS-80, so similar to MLR, but we use it as an air surveillance radar and to do air intercept and defensive counter-air. Anti-air warfare is one of the main missions of the unit that I command. We're actually pretty good at that. Like across DoD. Track management, like we've been doing track management for 30 years. That's not all that JADC2 is. So don't get too caught up in Link 16 and target, like we're pretty good at that. We just did it up at Gray Flag at Point Magoo. We're executing constructive kills in 1MEF every Wednesday. Come on down for, you know, after lunch, and we'll take you to building P1090 and show you. But I think that, you could come up, you can ask the next one, I'll be quick. I think where I'm going with this is there's a whole nother world out there that we're not even talking about. You can put sensors on anything. I say this all the time. You can put sensors on 7 tons, forklifts, I don't care what it is. You have electronic control units inside your privately owned vehicle, right? Tells you like when the gas is getting down, when the air pressure is not good on your car. Those are sensors. They're called ECUs. Where does that data go? Well, in some cases, if you've got OnStar, whether you paid for it or not, it's going in a data center somewhere, and they're doing something with that information. To do what? To do better maintenance. AI machine learning can improve every process across the Department of Defense. It's not only about targeting, is my point. CJIT2 is much bigger than just targeting. That's just the use case we use. Why? Refer back to the comment I made earlier. Blowing stuff up resonates with people. So we started there to get everyone's attention, but like don't fall short of human resource processes, P&R, INL, CD&I. You could go training and education command. I mean, there's so many different areas to explore when it comes to AI and machine learning, because that's what we're really talking about. That cloud-enabled network's gonna, what it's enabling is a DevSecOps environment, AI and machine learning and large language models. So there's room for growth across every single warfighting function, but we get laser focused on targeting. So we're actually pretty good at track management. We got joint interface control officers. We send people to joint schools. We may still have room for improvement there. I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but like we're better at that than we are at all the other stuff I just said.
Well, and just to highlight, it's not just about your joint customers, maybe your commercial customers. I mean, what Jason's identifying is that the type of data that we need to make access to, right, and do something with, the commercial industry is ahead of us, right? Because capitalistic decision making, dictates that. So let us learn from that, right? Like show that what your commercial customers are doing with your data as well, and how it can correlate to our gaps.
So Rob Brady with Expression Networks. Thank you for your service and thank you for the candor that y'all have brought today. With tech conversations, tech isn't the end goal, right? It's to make everyone more effective. It's to make our warfighters more effective. And we talked a little bit earlier about burden. You know, the existing system puts burden on the warfighter. They have to do things that they don't want to do, but they have to do something else. So I'd love to hear kind of across the table from your different perspectives of like, how are you experiencing those pain points? How is that burden manifesting what you're doing day to day?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think that's a great question. I'll talk about that one. So when I got to 3rd MLR, it was not 3rd MLR, it was called 3rd Marines, and this was in 2021. And everybody knew that we were going to transform into an MLR, and they immediately expected us to perform as the visionaries at McWill and at Headquarters Marine Corps had wanted to perform, but we had none of the equipment, none of the training, or the people that an MLR was supposed to have. We still had an infantry regiment's TO. And so as we got all of these new systems, and I say new, I'm going to use air quotes there, they were all just every single POR across the MAGTF that exists in the MEF crammed into an 06 level command. We had to figure out how to put all those pieces together. And it was mentioned earlier, as aviation C2 systems that were once exclusive to the Marine Air Control Group are now in a Marine division. And I'm trying to figure out how to put that together. So I have a Humvee, 5,000-pound Humvee in the back. It's got a air control unit, or excuse me, air conditioned unit to basically cool down servers, and it's got a high power Link 16 radio in there, and that's sitting next to all my normal PICHTR small form factor equipment. And I'm like, well, that's great that I have this PICHTR here, but then I have this huge Humvee here, so my physical signature is large, the power usage that I have is large, and I don't exactly know the best TTPs or practices to hook up all of these systems. Now, we slowly figured that out, but the work that MCTSSA is doing in taking all of those systems and figuring out the best practices is kind of moving the service in the right direction towards that. But we've got a lot of burden and there's a lot of toil, and there's no one whose job it was to do the systems integration of all of these fires, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance systems that we had in the MLR. And so what I did, and just like my predecessor here at MARFORPAC, Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Biden, he's not here right now, is we took charge of the kill chain. And the reason I did that is because of a personal belief I have, and that's because the kill chain is comm. All of it is. They're all servers, networks, and radios. And I do all of that, and I'm in all of the MAGTF, and I have the capacity, the capability to plan for it. And I know that's a little bit blasphemous sometimes to the intelligence community, but it's comm. It may not be a comm 06 all the time, but it's comm. So comm is the kill chain, and so I took all that and I started to iterate with my team on getting that just right and smaller and better. And I would say that that's probably a little bit of toil on my end, but those are the things we're trying to solve. And where technology can help out is getting those form factors as small as possible so we use less energy, so we have less, I don't have to translate between multiple different data types. And that I can track where this data is going in a way that is efficient and doesn't burden the network. And I can ultimately get to something that is joint and shareable with both everybody within the department, but as well as with our partners and allies. So that's just like a little snapshot. So I explained a lot, but getting all of that those systems and getting them to interoperate is quite difficult, especially when you're doing it under the pressure of time, and you have not necessarily been given the training or the expertise to do it, but you're expected to perform because it's a no-fail mission. And I'm sure a lot of the Marines in the first island chain and those who will go there within 1 MEF and 3 MEF are kind of feeling that because they know the importance of the mission and what we are being charged to do.
So one thing I would add is, you know, from my time as a studying engineering, and my time as systems command and to include CD&I, one thing I think a lot of us don't focus on is HSI, right? The human systems integration that must happen. If you look at all documents that are JSIS documents, that are, I don't know, requirements documents, you know, P specs and all those things, there's a lack of focus on the human himself or herself and what that person is going to have to do with that technology, right? Because I remember myself as a young forward observer back in my old life, as a young sniper sitting in a hive somewhere. I'm 125 pounds at the time, right? And I've got upwards of 100+ pounds on top of my body, right? And that includes batteries, radios, lasers, all those things that are on my body. So it got me thinking about the day I get to a seat where I get to implement rules and write documents that will focus on human and systems integration. That's what I'll do. And I think that's a big problem for us. And all those radios that are coming out today, they may be small, but they're lacking a lot of things. We want things that are hybrid in nature, multi-orbit, constellations, all those things, but that comes with size, weight, and power, right? So how do we miniaturize these things and keep and still give us all the things and the bells and whistles that we need and keep it small? By the way, reduce the burden of a training that requires and make it easy, make it the interface with the human as easy as possible.
Joe, can we ask a piggyback for you all? It's not about a capability or technology, it's about how a warfighter fights that system. Right?
Yes, exactly.
I want to piggyback on that. We're used to seeing things come out of Systems Command that don't take the warfighter into consideration.
They don't.
Yeah, I think I'll add to what you said. That was both of what you guys said was really, really great. I think that it's not as hard to build iterative technology. So joke around all the time about like the original SATCOM terminal was the L-SWAN. Remember that? It's like 2001-ish. It was like actually it was not even that. It was an urgent UNS after OIF-1 started. So it was like 2003 or something like that. VSAT, the VSAT terminal some VSATs and then the McQuiss-X and the different, the ones that we're buying now. McQuiss, I think we canceled one and curtailed the other one for the AAOs anyway. But those are just newer versions of the same thing. It's still like a 4096 shot for your aggregate bandwidth. It's a lot harder to project your thinking into the future and propose something that's revolutionary. Because people think you're crazy. Like, crazy doesn't sell very good, But I like to use my phone because it's the most practical example that everybody can resonate. It resonates with everybody because we all have one of these things and we carry this around. Like, the first time you got one of these in your hand in 2007, it changed your life forever. Like, I used to, as growing up, I remember watching the news with my parents. Sometimes it was just to see what the weather was going to be the next day so I could lay my clothes out to go to high school, you know what I mean? Like something real basic. Or you're checking the stock market. Like, you just do everything on your phone now. We bank on our phone. We take pictures and share our lives on our social media accounts with our friends and our families. And so this is revolutionary technology. Well, we're on the precipice of that in DoD right now with like what is in the realm of possible. And so I think the best practical example of that is application programming interfaces. When I said we were a software company that still thought it was a hardware company, we pay industry right now for bespoke solutions to stitch software together that was never fielded or ever intended to talk for one thing to talk to another. That's that interoperability problem on the software side that we're talking about with CJADC2, right? We're going to be able to do that. It's probably still the distant future, but the Marine Corps Software Factory where we're making 0671 or 06, 73s, the application developer MOS, we're going to be able to do some of that in-house now. We're going to need that at the edge of our network. Why? Because we need to, inside the WES, with the MLR, with the control group, we need to be able to persist in the WES disconnected. So I call it no probability of intercept and no probability of detect because I don't plan to turn my SATCOM terminal on very much.
Can you explain what the WES is?
Yeah, the weapons engagement zone. And so essentially in the first island chain, every square inch of the first island chain is inside the weapons engagement zone for anti-ship cruise missiles and basically cruise and ballistic missiles. So anything that can be seen can be targeted. Every time I turn my radar on, every time I turn my Starshield terminal on, they could see it from space with Chinese whatever they call national technical means, with their SIGINT capability. We never had to worry about that when we were younger because the Taliban and the Iraqi Republican Corps had no SIGINT capability. So we got into some bad habits. We put OE-254s on the roof of the RC Southwest command post when I was a company commander at 9th Com. I'm not proud to admit that, but we did because we weren't really worried about getting targeted. There was nothing to shoot at us, right? But inside the WES, if I turn off my SATCOM terminal and I have a hybrid cloud solution on the edge of my network, I can now stitch software together right there at the edge of the network with application developers, the people that know how to write that software and how to stitch it together. So that's like revolutionary. Like it's hard to, if you don't understand how the technology works, it's really hard for you to even think about that, you know? So I think that this is predating me. Might not be predating you and Master.
Hey, 23 years.
Okay, I'm older than you then. So never mind. You can make fun of me now. But one of my previous bosses, and actually was when Curtis and I worked together in the G6, and Tommy was a major, I was a boot lieutenant colonel, and Curtis was a captain. Colonel Dillon said this to me one time. Pete Dillon was our boss, and he said that the day that the Marine Corps, the comm community shunned information operations, and then we taught it in the schoolhouse when you and I went to M1 school, information operations not our job, that's a different McQuip. You know, we don't do information operations. He called that like an inflection point to me one time when we were talking in private. He's like, I think we might have messed that up. He goes, hindsight's 20/20. I've got 20 years of thinking about it now. I think we should have did the opposite. We gave up SCI comms to the Intel community. He didn't think that was a good idea. So I think we're kind of at a watershed moment right now for the comm community. Our community needs to step up, and we need to stand up and be counted. Because I believe, I didn't pay him to say what he just said, but I couldn't have said it better myself. You are absolutely right. The comm community is more important right now than it ever, well, what we do is more important now than it has ever been in my entire 26 years in the Marine Corps. I have a different idea for how we could use our skills in the data science arena. I think that's what our community should become. But we have to get the hardware and software to a place where we don't need individual MOSs. So if I replaced your single channel radio with this as a voice solution, you don't need a radar operator to operate this. The software's so exquisite, it's intuitive. You just kind of figure it out. That's what makes it so user-friendly, right? So that's what I mean. That's a total, that's like playing pool, right? What makes you really good at shooting pool? You got to be thinking 5 steps ahead, or playing chess, right? That's the way we need to start thinking. It's not just one thing. We've got a whole bunch of things we got to do. But if we can get on the other side of that, then those things that are possible could actually become reality.
All right, next question, please.
Go for it.
Aloha. Oh, I can hold it like Beyonce. Taylor Swift. The Pure Swiftie. First of all, what I most want to see is the 5 of you do a Rubik's Cube off. You get it? That's a joke. Anyway, aloha mai kako, Lauren kapolia hi'iaka na velu na kaina pai pai shem ko uinoa. No manoa mai au, no Maui ni ihau, Hawaii Island, Maui, Lahaina mai au. I said my family's from all of these islands. My mom is from Oklahoma. I'm the lightest skin in my family. So. Sorry, I always get nervous when I have to speak I was on the speech team and I still get nervous. But especially in front of people of your accolades, I'm Ian. I'm the eldest of many children here in the islands. My family has been in government for a very long time. My grandfather started 27 unions, and my uncle was the governor. And I hate politics, and I've grown up with somewhat of a distrust of the military due to the history of this place. However, I was just telling this kind gentleman, Thomas, outside just now, I'm really thrilled to share that I'm the owner and founder of a company called Aloha AI Incorporated. We're a Delaware Incorporated C Corp, represented by a very prominent tech attorney in Los Angeles, and we're currently working out the terms with NVIDIA and Neotech, as well as a group called Genesis Group that includes some of the biggest family offices in the world. That is clean money. So the prayer that I wrote last year on my dad's, first of all, I should have started with this, but it's rather long, so forgive me for just a moment. E koma koma koe loko kalani e ho ano ya koe no hiki mai po pune malama ia ko make make. Maka hunu nini. E hiki mea I malama ia makalani la e hawi mai ma koe ke ala I aina ma kona ni ala. E kala mai hoi ia ma koe kama ko la vehala ana me ma koe kala nei ka po e la kala e kama ko. Mai ho kua ia ma koe ka ho vale vale ia mai ho pa kele no na ia ma koe ka ino na ka mea na ki opuni me ka mana me ka ho na ni ama lo aku amene. I speak other languages too. Spanish, some Italian, Chinese. I'm partnering with a Ukrainian company. Yana Holets is the CEO and founder of Neotech. She has the infrastructure contract for the state of California, and we're going to secure the contract here for the state of Hawaii. We're very grateful for your service and your protection. That being said, the thing that we're most excited about with the NVIDIA and Neotech Aloha AI partnership is the innovation in the space of using renewable energy to power generative AI. Because Microsoft is buying nuclear power plants, and it's really unnecessary given the speed at which this technology is being innovated with, that no soldier should have to carry 120 pounds when he's 125 pounds in the bushes, right? It's completely unnecessary, and you folks all know that.
Made him who he is today, though.
Right. I mean, you look like a strong guy. Hey, I wouldn't try to bench press you, okay, brother? I'm pretty sure you got me. No jiu-jitsu, okay? But I can scrap. Okay, my sister, okay, so my baby sister is a professional soccer player, attorney, and a lobbyist in Congress. And I would just like to share with you that we have presence all over the world as part Hawaiians, but because we're so multiracial and multi-ethnic here, we believe that Hawaii can be a place to innovate with the use of our natural resources to empirically show the governments of the world that returning the natural flow of the water back to its original flow, like in Lahaina, where the root cause of the fire is the unnatural, illegal diversion of the water. Aole, this is a question. How is pehea oi? Olelo makuhine oi? This is Hawaii, sir. This is the legal language of Hawaii. So if you don't, I'm speaking in English because I want you to understand. It's much easier because of the epistemology of my language to say things much more simply in Hawaiian because it's a more articulate, eloquent language than English. Thank you, though. The question is, how is the United States military going to support the care for these islands because nuclear submarines and all of these Air Force bases have polluted our waters? And I respectfully ask that you let me finish this question, because I've been reminded so many times in the past 16 months that I'm a woman, and I don't think if any of these guys took a long time to answer a question, that you would come sit next to them and remind them that they needed to sum it up. Mahalo.
So, you know, I served here from 05 to 08, right? Hawaii's been an important part. My brother-in-law just left, you know, serving here in Hawaii. You know, 4 of you here live in Hawaii. Can you speak to the whole of society, right? There's a whole of society part of this. The entrepreneurship, right, that is shown here, and the collaboration that is shown here, right? It is really our competitive advantage in this nation, right? China may field technology faster, but it would be a top-down dictated technology.
Yeah.
You know, capitalism in a democratic republic is the greatest form of crowdsourcing ever invented, right? 330 million people betting on themselves, right? And we as a society benefit from it. So largely we've cut ourselves off from that in the government because of our bureaucratic barriers, right? So can you just speak to kind of your own personal views about this whole of society, approach, and why it's so important that we aren't putting the policy and bureaucratic barriers between us and the capability that changed your life, right? Whenever we held that iPhone. Over to any of you.
I'm Curtis Miller. I finally will answer a question today.
Thank you. I'm sorry for last September. My daughter's been blowing up my phone telling me I'm a bad mom, so sorry.
No worries. We appreciate you. I am in the G639. I've been a computer guy for, this is my 26th year in the military. I have served in North Carolina, California, Okinawa, been in Korea, obviously Afghanistan, and during that whole period. I've traveled a lot of places thanks to the military, and that was actually the reason why I joined the Marine Corps. I got serious about dating my wife, and I said, I got to do something with my life, and I like to travel. I've seen a lot of different cultures. I learned a little bit of Japanese myself, Skoshi, right? But as service members, we have a responsibility to go into a culture and respect that culture and give back to that culture, right? And so it is a whole of government project to make sure that we go into a place and we leave it better than what we came. And that's been a thing that the culture that the Marine Corps has instilled in us from the time we stepped on the yellow footprints. You go into a place and you leave it better than when you came. And so that, I think for me personally, I've been here and I've volunteered probably in several different on-base organizations and with off-base organizations. And that's my way of giving back to this community. My wife does the same thing. She's an Aloha ambassador. I can appreciate the introduction there.
Okay, sorry, I know it's long, but my grandma, I can hear her.
Yes, ma'am. And so we can appreciate those things. And I think we can all say that when we go into a culture that we're not used to or accustomed to, our job is to learn it. That's that human to human thing, right? After I leave the military, I just got a bachelor's degree in sociology. So this question was like perfect for me. I've been in IT my whole career, several certifications in IT and cybersecurity, but that's my passion actually. And so from a technological perspective and how that interacts with the human world, there are consequences if we don't do things right. I think a lot of the things we're talking about actually would help the environment. It would actually help reduce the footprint of the technological consequences that we've endured. So we definitely hear your heart, and I think the way that we're moving from not just a country, but from a DoD perspective is to help to build up in places that we're operating.
So what I would like to add to what Curtis said, Sam, is that I actually wrote a requirement so let's take this back to warfighting and our responsible use of weapons if we're in we're in another place, right? I actually wrote a requirement for a cognitive assistant. Let's take this back to AI, artificial intelligence, be able to advise us when we're going to use a round that may have an impact that we may not foresee, right? And so because it has the ability to understand the geological impact, the impact of the community. So that's to your point, that's what we can leverage industry to also help improve what we're doing in warfighting.
I talked to someone yesterday, and we were talking about. He was like, "What do you guys need? What do you want? What are your gaps?" I said, "Actually, the technology exists today. We couldn't really say that 5 years ago. To be able to do a lot of the things that we want to do the most efficient and effective way with minimal consequences. That technology exists today. That's why we want to partner with industry. We want to leverage the things that are there, but our bureaucratic process has slowed down our ability to implement a lot of those things. So we've, a coalition of the willing, we're partnering and we're doing the things necessary so that we can speed up the cycle in order to be more effective in what we're trying to do.
I think, I mean, I'm assuming this is one of the reasons that you're here today, but I think you're onto something with your company. And what you're doing has a lot of potential to be good in multiple ways, and you mentioned some of it when you were talking. I mean, AI and machine learning, like the power requirement to achieve anything really is going to be astronomical. And you mentioned Microsoft purchasing like nuclear power facilities. I don't know. I know at the federal government, maybe not necessarily internal to the Department of Defense, although somebody in the Pentagon's probably thinking about that. In what particular office, I'm not sure. But if we're going to get to a point across the whole federal government, really, where we're going to want to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning for more and more things, and we most definitely are, those data centers are going to put the environment at risk, and but I think that what you said that sounded really exciting to me, which is obviously part of your proposition for your company, is we can accomplish that and still be responsible citizens too, and not damage the environment by renewable energy. And there's so much good work being done in that across Department of Defense, and actually total coincidence, but that's one of Brandon's areas of expertise, and his company gets after that every day. How do we produce via renewables the amount of energy that we need into the power grid to accomplish this stuff? And because we don't have a lot of AI and machine learning going on yet, it's still probably more aspirational than, like, we haven't achieved as much as we've wanted, not even close. We know what we want to do, we're just not there yet. What we are building a lot of big data centers, and all those data centers will eventually set conditions for companies like yours and NVIDIA, for instance, to be able to bring us technological solutions to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, the other side of that, the nasty side of that, is the amount of power the grid's going to have to be able to provide to do that. And this is good for both industries, because it will help the renewable industry, renewable energy industry too, whether that's solar, hydro, it doesn't matter what it is. So sounds like a pretty interesting space, and those two industries pretty naturally overlap, which is good for you, I think.
To your question, we don't have a lot of influence on what the decisions that the government is making. We're at the super tactical level for the most part, but I think the point is where we are, where we sit, where we have influence. We have moral responsibilities and obligations, and we have to each individually make that decision to make the right decision.
We do incentivize our installation commanders across the entire Marine Corps to get after renewable energy. I mean, a lot of what I've noticed in the last 10 years is related to solar power, and buying more and more solar power to lighten the stress on the power grid in whatever city our base is part of, whatever community we're part of. So there's been a lot of money there. The Marine Corps in particular, all the DoD's doing it, but you can go to almost any Marine Corps base and see a lot more solar panels than you ever saw before. We're installing it on privatized housing on our base houses. That's probably the most visible, like outwardly visible area of progress that you can see. Not as much wind yet, but that also depends on where your base is and whether there's even an opportunity to capture that energy via wind farms. I know that out towards 29 Palms, in the desert in California, they have that ability. I'm not sure if the base does though. Have anybody here been stationed at 29 Palms?
Yeah, I mean, they're putting it almost looks like the noodle,
Yeah.
green noodle. They're putting a lot of those on the newer buildings. So any part of the day it's catching wind, and there's a line of them across the top of the building, so it's generating regenerative energy.
Yeah.
Lucas, next question?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate the passion of the question, and I wholeheartedly agree with thinking about it. We didn't know the world was flat until we we thought the world was flat until we realized the world wasn't flat. We thought asbestos was a good way of insulating things until we realized asbestos was not a good thing for the environment. Same thing with chlorofluorocarbons, right? They were creating a whole new ozone layer. We didn't know what we didn't know until we fixed it. PFAS, you know, for our fire departments and stuff, right? So we're not perfect. The Marines aren't perfect. There's an entire generation of Marines that are suffering from cancer now because of chemicals in the water at Camp Lejeune. So we're not perfect when we identify a problem. I think everybody in the room and everybody across the U.S. government wants to fix it. We just don't know what we don't know until we realize that we've gone too far and it's time to correct it. So I share with your passion as a Native American. We're on the same wavelength. So thank you for that. I guess back to kind of your CJAD C2 campaign of learning that you've been on, and thank you for the collaboration that we've had. I've met a lot of you over the last couple of years. Colonel Quinter and I have known each other for, 20 years now. Bob Schultz, Brandon Newell, and I were classmates together a long time ago. We had a conversation last night about, we've learned some things, different exercises, tell us certain technologies maybe are ready now, but this is all experimentation at the very tactical edge, so third MLR, MARFORPAC. How does that, what seems to me there's two major themes that need to occur for Project Dynamis or really to achieve some sort of successes with CJAD C2 is, one, you have to modernize the network rapidly, right? So that's one of your lines of effort. And two, there's got to be an overall data strategy, and that's, there's not one person that can do that. There's not one company that can do any of that. It takes a whole of industry to put pieces and parts together, and it takes a whole of the military organization to bring all that together into a solution that makes sense for the warfighter. So we've done some of that now, I guess, in the Agile PM and what you're showing, the sprint. What's next? What's the next step? We've learned some things, right? MCTSSA has validated some things. What's the next step? How does this get to the requirements process? Because we're kind of on the fringes, and I don't want to go through this for the next 10 years. I'd love to go do these exercises, but like I don't want to relearn the same thing 10 times over. I want to get to the next step of like we're actually implementing change, which I think is what Astra's at. There's some quick wins that can be had here in the near future. Where do you see those next steps from your?
Well, I think this goes back to, maybe I'll segue this over to you, Bob. This thing started off, some crazy lieutenant colonel going to the fleet, and, I remember the first time I came to MARFORPAC, and I got Curtis and you and your predecessor. Who was the predecessor?
Colonel Gerber.
What's that?
Gerber.
No, it wasn't even Gerber. No, the SPO before you.
Willoughby?
Anyway, and we sat in the conference room, and you guys just let me click off safe and talk for like 2 or 3 hours, and then we came up for oxygen.
We can't keep you clicked on.
Everybody was like, holy cow, this guy is freaking crazy. But that's probably partially true, at least. But what I was going to say is there's probably not an easy answer to your question, Luke. I mean, it got pulled up to the service level, and I keep bringing up this JFN decision because it's going to impact Project Dynamis. And anybody that thinks that it doesn't is crazy. Astro's strategy when he was put in charge of this by General Glavy was to kind of maximize economy of scale from the other services because they have a lot more money than we do. And so they didn't ask me what I thought, but I thought that was a good way to approach it because the Marine Corps doesn't have deep pockets. And so we were going to capitalize on units like 18th Airborne Corps, PACAF, other services that were making progress, SOCOM, with Maven Smart Systems and some other technologies. But now that the Air Force has been declared like we're not the best amongst equals, I guess if you want to call it that, that's going to throw a wrench into some things. And why I say that is because if we're taking that strategy, then Project Dynamis is kind of dead. Because JFN is the Indo-PACOM commander's solution to CJAD C2. He's testified in front of Congress and said that. So if that's the case, then continuing on down a road where we're going after our own solution, which is what I wrote in that paper, may not be the best answer. I mean, we don't have to do that, right? And so If the Marine Corps feels like this is still informing our own programs of record enough, then I think we should keep our foot on the gas. I think it's going to succeed or fail based off of MARFORPAC's ability to advocate for this capability. TJ and I never stop. Like, the analogy is like, it's like when you walk by a park and it's really peaceful and there's a duck and the duck's just floating around and whatever. What are the duck's legs doing underneath the water? That's me and TJ. We're the legs. And so I told Astro this when I handed the ball over to him. I said, if you think I'm going to stop doing this inside the formation that I'm commanding, then you don't know me very well, because I will continue to work with industry to come up with solutions. And so I think that's what we need to do. We can't afford to just kind of stop and watch what the Air Force is doing. We need to keep doing what we're doing until we have a more informed opinion about whether they're succeeding or failing as it relates to us. The Air Force is a very different mission than us, and I don't know who coined the term JTAC of the Joint Force, but after we talked last night, I think Luke might have been the OG for that one when he worked at OLA. But anyway, I think that if that's our services proposition to the combatant commander, that we are the JTAC of the Joint Force, what the Air Force delivers through the JFN program either will help us achieve what we keep saying we want to do, or it won't. But I think that having General Glenn advocate, General Carter advocate, if we don't want to call it advocacy, then fine. But like, we need people that have C4 cyber and intel expertise saying the same thing, so that the people that are not in our MOS will start to believe it, because we are in competition for resources internal to our own service too. I just told everybody about 3 hours ago that Project Dynamis is not in the top 10 of the capability gap list for the Commandant. If you believe that we're going to close the kill chain on the network and everything that Lieutenant Colonel Logan was just professing, then it should be number one. I told you the Joint Fires Network is the top capability gap in all of DoD. That's regardless of service, combatant commands, it's number one. And so the fact that it's not in the top 10 for the Marine Corps, we can call it Project Dynamis, we could call it Project Overmatch, but the fact that CJADC2, the requirements to achieve CJADC2 are not the top requirements in the capability gap list for the Marine Corps is concerning to me, because that's the next step. If our service chief thinks that that's the most important thing, then we will close live kill chains on SIPRNet, or close kill chains on live SIPRNet. If not, we will continue to talk about this for years to come, because they have to believe that. And Top Gun 2 is way more sexy than like a cyber movie. I'm telling you, like, if you can convince an F-35 pilot that the kill chain's actually on the SIPRNet, not on the wings of his or her jet, then that's what winning looks like. But we're not there yet, because I still talk to general officers, and I will protect the innocent. I'm not here to, like, get myself in trouble. But when general officers tell you that, oh, AI is like 10 years away, I'm like, what? Like, have you used your phone lately? Like, it's like right here on my phone. Like, my emails are in the cloud. They're not on my phone. And so, but that's that generational gap I was talking about, where people that are, I'm almost 50, and people that are, my parents are almost 80, and my mom does not like technology. She unabashedly admits that. She's like, yeah, I don't FaceTime, book, what is it called? Like, yeah, I don't use that.
Instabook?
Yeah, Instabook.
I don't use that.
And we laugh about it, but officers senior to me, general officers, flag officers, admirals, generals and admirals, they grew up without this technology. I use this, I'm dating myself here, but like, we didn't have the internet when I was in high school, or cell phones. I went to high school from 1990 to 1994. I didn't start regularly using the internet until I was a freshman in college at North Carolina State, and I had to start doing things on the internet. So I learned what a computer lab was, and that's where I spent most of my time as an undergrad when I was studying engineering. But we learned word processing and typing when I was in high school. We didn't learn.
Can we have that be the follow-up? So you all command and lead digital natives, right? Young Marines.
Yeah.
And you all exist for the young Marine, right? Like, you do your job so the young Marine can do theirs.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up with maybe anything you have to share about the digital natives that are your young Marines that are asked to do a job, and you're giving them antiquated systems, right? That are harder for them to understand and use than the one that's in their pocket. Just any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is more of a talent management discussion, but we need to take advantage of the skills that they have learned and grew up with and move those Marines to places where they can feel like they're adding value and impact to the service. Things like 0673s at the Marine Corps Software Factory, places like these innovation centers of excellence where we can actually have them develop something that can actually be used. Recently, and this has nothing to do with software, I saw there was an article of a Marine who got an MSM corporal type, for fixing something on the JLTV. Those Marines are out there, but kind of our old school mentality of, you got to wait till you get to this level to make decisions. We need to be a little bit more critical about how we do that and elevate those skill sets and take a hard look at how we're doing business and maybe turn things on its head to actually get where we need to go faster. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think for industry, if you're making something, and I want to take it away from like the exquisite Marines that we're looking at, right? The 0673 is like, that's a pilot program, right? So that's something that might not even come to full fruition for us. So you have to look at the base level Marine, right? Whether it's, if you're looking inside the communications field, that young 21, that young 31, that young 71, a lot of them now are way ahead, like coming out of high school. They outpace, like that mind of that young Marine outpaces the schoolhouse that they're going to, right? Because we're so antiquated in our process of, updating our curriculum, things like that. So, and it's hard, granted, right? But I think industry has done a good job with the things that we procure, right? As communicators, the new radio systems that we use, the new servers that we get, if it has a brand new GUI that's easier for them to understand, but is still very, intuitive, I think that's what you as industry have done a good job with and continue to do a good job with. And if you're looking for the kudos from the Marines, I think that's what it is it's making things that are already things that they're familiar with, right? Like everyone remembers when, the robots for EOD first came out, what was used in the Humvee to control them? It was like a N64 controller. And the Marines were like, oh yeah, I know how to use this, that's easy, right? So I think it's things like that where you look at what they're currently using today, and if you're gonna make a system, or if you're gonna propose a system, make it with something that this, and I don't wanna say younger generation because I'm only 40, right? I'm a millennial, but make it with something that the generation nowadays is gonna click with, immediately. So that's my perspective on it is, yes, when you get Marines now that can outpace you as a leader, right? In terms of thought process, we're not getting Marines, we're not recruiting Marines that are like, hey, attack the hill, roger that. They're saying why, right? It starts with why, right? So they're questioning, the processes, the things that you do. And when you talk about things that upset Marines and the toil, that's what it is it's the extra process as in a job for us as communicators that's already difficult, right? Because our job evolves constantly, right? When I was a young communicator, it was push to talk. I never thought I would have anything to do with IPs, but for me, I understood that if I didn't, evolve in my thought process, that, I was going to get left behind, archaic. So I think that's the biggest thing with innovation and helping out that generation that we're going to be and continue to recruit to, right, is give them things and give them products, that are already in line with the things that they use and the things that they do in their normal life.
I think you could also, to piggyback off Master Guns, like, you know, we all take a test when we come in the military, GCT for officers, or the GT test for the enlisted poolies. I think I actually took the GCT as like a TVS student.
ASVAB.
Yeah, or ASVAB, yeah. So, but to determine like your general level of intelligence, like makes you wonder if like maybe that's such an archaic model that maybe what we should be testing for is digital literacy. And if we're going to get to a data-centric, to be a data-centric organization, that's probably a more valuable skill. Like, do I really, I mean, I say that because the cost of college tuition now has gotten so astronomically expensive that people are starting to walk away from the I have to go to college to be successful model.
I don't have a college degree.
Yeah, and you have your own company now, so you're a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I have high school. I have 4 kids. One's in high school, one's in college, and my high school age daughter, who's about to graduate high school 6 months early, she's just contemplating going to community college because she's like, well, I can do 2 years there for basically free. And so it's like that model's changing, and so maybe we should be less concerned about like your general level of intelligence and more concerned about your digital literacy if we're going to get to a point where that's what's more valuable to the service. Because our training and education, like the way we train and educate our Marines, is pretty archaic too, and we're evolving. A lot more live virtual constructive training and that kind of stuff now, but I think that what we're really trying to say is we value people's digital literacy more than we ever did before. So. Hopefully that's helpful.
All right, so join me in thanking the panel. I'm going to ask you to stay for a few minutes. So Bob is going to come up and wrap us up. It's just going to be a few minutes, so if you don't mind just staying for that closeout.
Yeah, so the question from Luke on next steps, I want to generate some policy in what, and feed the joint staff what they ought to be telling us. So if you've got recommendations on data policy, feed them my way, because we'll energize the joint staff and then go ahead and task the DoD, and then they'll be in line where we want them, where we want them to go. So open to some help there. Other next steps, we've been a lead bat to the service from MARFORPAC in steering them, but to your point, we need to be advising the GCC, and we need to be advising the Navy on where they ought to go. So I need your feedback where they have programs that may be out of line with us, and let us advocate as part of the naval force to make sure we're in sync. And then lastly, so we're talking like that's application, that's transport layer. We start talking about MPE down below the echelon 4 level where there is no DoD full unity there. I think working with TJ on MPE-like capabilities compared to what First Corps is doing with GDIT, there's an overlap there as we nest underneath Olympus. So if you have opportunities you think we ought to be going for as those future operations, the guide series and other things evolve, we'll tie the operational forces into it and at the time and place of our choosing. So those are next steps. Everybody okay with hearing from us on a monthly basis or something like that? And if you ask to be removed, well, I'll jump right off, right?
I thought you was going to say quarterly. You said monthly.
Well, so in my mind, I'm going to see you all again after the holidays when we have a thing in February, right? And so we're going to owe you progress there. And so a quarterly basis doesn't get it done if 2027 is the marker. So that's my goal. I neglected to say that I used to have my own business, a small business. I had contracts with Syscom, CD&I, Pentagon, whatever, right? And I know what it's like to write those proposals at 2:30 in the morning. Let's freaking get out of the cycle, right? Let's work together. And so I'm here to serve. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your time.